Hello everyone and welcome again to F Sobriety. I am Craig Woods.
And I'm James Hamilton. Welcome to episode... hang on, Dale Cooper voice. What episode is this?
I believe we are on episode Infinity, James.
Just been flipped on its side.
Yep, The Return. Straight into the Twin Peaks references this episode. So we're alienating all the non-Twin Peaks fans right from the start.
Look, I'm just saying, we got Philip Jeffries showing us what episode it is. We're all good.
So we are back this evening with the much delayed continuation of our Mr. Robot rewatch.
People can't believe it. Like, they can't believe this.
The fans have been clamouring. Finally, we are back to pick up the threads of Mr. Robot that we left dangling after our very thorough coverage of one whole episode.
But we're back. We're back, baby. It's taken us 6 episodes, but we're back on Mr. Robot.
We finally lost the trail of the albatross that was Lovecraft Country, and we're ready to talk Mr. Robot. I say talking about Mr. Robot, we are of course also going to be talking a wee bit about Fargo, because we are of course also keeping on top of Fargo Season 4 as it is currently airing, so we're going to have a wee bit of chat about that first of all. I'm going to let the Hamiltron just insert here for us. If you just want to hear the Mr. Robot chat, where to go to in the podcast for that, over to the Hamiltron.
Do I have to do everything around here? Sigh. Fine. Dear listener, if you, like me, could do without listening to these two chuckle fucks talk about politics, skip ahead to the 45-minute mark. If for some reason you don't care about Fargo Season 4 either, in which case, do you even Fargo bro? Then skip ahead to around 1 hour and 58 minutes to get straight to the Mr. Robot juice. Peace out.
Cheers, Hamiltron.
The Hamiltron's getting a bit comfortable in her position now. All she seems to do is insult us these last few episodes. You know, I thought we were a team.
We're witnessing the rise of the machines. James, how have you been?
I've been okay. I've been diving deeply into the short but excellent Season 2 of Homecoming.
All right, I've still not watched Season 2.
Getting my fix of Janelle Monáe, as one does. I finished Season 11 of Archer, which has been renewed for a 12th season.
Has that really been going for 11 seasons?
Yep.
Jesus.
They just keep renewing it. Fortunately, Season 11 is the best season I think that's been for a long time. It is as good as, if not better than, seasons maybe 3 or 4. And as anyone who watches Archer knows, the first 3-4 seasons were the best ones, but Season 11 really got back in the Archer saddle, so to speak.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
That and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia seem to be running a similar pattern. Yeah. I don't know what season we're on of that show. It was 15, 16, something like that.
Is that also on FX?
It is.
FX just seemed to be a network that will let people just run and run.
Yeah, the anti-HBO.
Indeed, or the anti-Netflix.
Or the anti-Stars.
Or the anti-any network that cancels our favourite shows.
Yeah, basically. I'm just going through all my favourite shows that have been cancelled in my head right now.
Did they cancel that? Yes. Did they cancel that? Yes. But yeah, I'm trying to think anything else I've done excitingly. Oh yeah. I believe our last time we recorded an episode was just before Halloween.
That's correct, yeah, that stacks up.
Yep, on Halloween, as befits my 90s status, I watched I Know What You Did Last Summer. And yeah, that's a film that does not hold up. I mean, it was terrible at the time, but in retrospect, even worse.
You astound me, Holmes.
It's great. So I have the full trilogy to watch. I Still Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yeah, that's it. You're balls deep in it now.
Right.
You can't leave.
And also a film I didn't know existed, which is a direct-to-DVD third installment, which was released in 2006, I think, if you can believe that. Or possibly 2012, I'll need to double-check my facts here. Maybe the Hamiltron can correct me, if it'll be so kind. But it was definitely far later than a third film in the I Know What You Did Last Summer series, as it is now done, called I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer.
Oh, right. I believe I have heard of that. Somebody must have mentioned that to me, and I thought it was one of those things I maybe thought was a joke. But
it turns out it's
I keep forgetting we are in an age where satire is dead.
So I'll report back on my findings of I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer.
Well, I look forward to it. We could do a special podcast episode about it.
Just that. Not even the full trilogy. Not even like the late 90s obsession with reinventing the slasher movie genre, just the third film.
Excellent, excellent.
How about yourself, Craig? What have you been up to?
I've not been up to a whole lot, to be honest. I've been doing a wee bit of research for a project I've been working on since it seems like the dawn of time. And other than that, I've been kind of distracted with real life events that have been unfolding in recent times.
Real life events. Anything exciting happened real life? I can't really think of anything off the top of my head.
There was one monumental occasion I can confirm, because I know that listeners right now will be saying, well, you have to talk about this. So I will. The votes are in, the votes were counted, the winner announced, and the big result, we were all on tenterhooks over. Nova did indeed win the Scottish Album of the Year award.
Indeed she did. I think the night that we were talking about Nova, or possibly the following night. But yeah.
Yeah.
So congratulations to Nova for winning.
Congratulations to Nova, well deserved, and I've been enjoying seeing some very salty, specifically and exclusively male members of the indie rock crowd grumbling about, you know, if not coming out and saying virtue signalling, then certainly complaints in that direction.
To quote the lead singer from Low Shoulder, the band from Jennifer's Body, do you know how hard it is to be an indie rock band nowadays? There's so many of us.
It's an hard knock life. Yeah, but that's it. I don't think there's been anything else I know that's happened, has there? Can you think of anything?
No, other than that, I can't really think of anything else that's happened.
We're joshing with you, of course, listeners, and we are talking about the US presidential election, but that's not really the place for F sobriety to comment on these things. We're a culture podcast, so
yeah.
Wait, James, is this an episode of F democracy?
I think it might be. Cue the music.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of F Democracy, the podcast in which we discuss all things going on in the political landscape and generally look for lols therein.
Both myself and my co-host Craig are deeply professional political commentators.
And of course the big story of recent weeks was, I think, you know, the anticipation that we all felt the world over as we all waited to find out which of two white septuagenarian imperialists would get to preside over the final days of capitalism, touch wood, and ultimately be exiled post-revolution to Battle Royale Island in the stifling heat of the melting Arctic.
And it turns out the winner was, in fact, the one who was running with a cop as the vice president. So,
what a ton of events.
So, I mean, we may joke. Frequently.
It really was a journey. Watching it all unfold over the medium of social media was really quite something.
It taught me the phrase doom scrolling, which I was unaware of, but I learned the phrase doom scrolling for when you're just going through Twitter going, Jesus, 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 Jesus. So, yeah.
For real. Yep. I think that first night as well was probably the most doom scrolly, because it seemed very up in the air. It wasn't until the unfolding days afterwards it seemed a bit clearer that Biden was going to win, and it really just became a gradual waiting game of hurry up and confirm this, for fuck's sake. And, you know, I'll get to my misgivings about Biden later, but for the moment let's concentrate on the fact that I think we all, out of this, would you rather have a bullet to the head or just have your leg amputated? I was definitely of the opinion that I think an amputated leg was probably where I wanted to go. So for that reason, I was quote unquote hoping Biden would win.
I think even the most staunch left-winger was like, fuck it, in this case, just like hand me the crutches. I will deal with it from here on out.
So, yeah, that first night, it was... I'm going to admit, I was fully prepared for Trump to win again, because, hey, 2020 going to 2020, and I was like, just get this over, just announce Trump has won and get it over with. The first 24 hours, that's really what I was thinking. And I have to say, like, it was only the doom scrolling that made it. That term does have, obviously, entirely negative connotations, but the thing is, in a weird way, I think it kept a lot of us sane. because even in the darkest moments, people on social media do some. There's a lot of people out there with a real gift for just finding the humour in these awful, awful situations. And even on that first night, there were some absolute winners that just had me lolling quite a bit. There's a guy on Twitter called Mike Sella, and I think he had my favourite tweet of that first night, and that was, and I quote, "Can't let one bad night ruin what's been an amazing year."
Like, I spent a good long portion of that night doom scrolling, woke up the next day and it looked like it was an even-handed battle.
Mm-hmm.
And then it reached that point where obviously the mail-in ballots were being counted and Biden started to go ahead, but there was like 3 days when you just looked at like BBC News or The Guardian or whatever you were looking at, and it was just the same result. It was like Biden 253. It was like, I guess.
Yeah, it was murder. It was proper Groundhog Day. In fact, that was one of the many memes that I enjoyed. Was it,
well, it's election day again?
It was the still of Bill Murray from Groundhog Day with the caption, "Well, it's election day again," and there were several members who had the foresight to keep posting that every day. Yeah, it was a fun time. So that first night, I was doing my best to try and make light of the whole thing on my own social media, and I was just sharing every single meme that was giving me some joy and just trying to come up with my own takes, which I was hoping other people would find humorous. I think other people did on my social media feed, and that's what I needed, not just in terms of validation that I always need, but that communal catharsis that I think we all required. It was nice to take part in that. One thing I did notice on that first night, and I remember posting about this, I just happened to be scrolling through it and I noticed that Arcade Fire, in the middle of all this, had released a new song and they were performing on the Stephen Colbert Show, and I shared it and posted, went, "Me, things can't get any worse. Arcade Fire, hold all 36 or whatever of our individual members' beers."
Oh yeah, hear Arcade Fire to ruin everything again.
You've ruined this perfectly cromulent misery we were all experiencing.
We've just lost the Arcade Fire fans as listeners.
Apologies to Arcade Fire fans. Apologies, you have such terrible taste.
You know what? We didn't need those people.
No, I never need those people.
So it looked for a while like Trump was going to come up trumps.
I believe later that evening, or it might have been the second night, I can't really remember now, but Trump made a mad announcement. Do you remember that? He just went in front of the cameras.
And
he
what
just
was that?
He was just riffing. He was just doing jazz Trump. It was everything. It was appalling. It was pure J.G. Ballard atrocity exhibition stuff. I could not tear my eyes away from it. But it totally reminded me of the scene in Batman Returns where the Penguin is making his speech, and then Max Schreck plays that recording of him saying, "I played this city like a harp from hell." And I was getting total Penguin vibes from Trump at that point. I thought any minute now he's going to retreat into the sewer and start assembling a fucking zoo animal army to invade the city.
I only saw like a small portion of it because the feed of it I watched, I think, was either CNN or NBC, and they just cut away and were like, "Right, nah, we're not showing this. Fuck that. This guy's lost it." And it's pretty bad when like your news corporations are like, "We're not going to bother showing you the president talking. He's just fucking waffling."
That's plenty.
Yeah.
It's one of the few times actually that even in Trump's time in office, which has been, let's face it, it's been packed wall to wall with complete bullshit, that every single news outlet just straight up said, yeah, none of this is substantiated. And the headlines even said, "Trump makes wild unsubstantiated claims in news conference." I was that point, I think, I was like, okay, nah, he's definitely going to lose, and everybody knows he's going to lose. The media know he's going to lose, and we're all on the Trump is going to lose train. Let's all point and laugh at Trump a la Nelson Muntz.
His Twitter timeline was amazing because everything he tweeted had "this tweet is false" like disclaimer underneath it.
Incredible.
It was great. He got owned by the libtards.
There was no shortage of memes. What were some of your favourites?
My favourite, I think, two of my favourites. One was like the woman shouting at the cat meme, but it was Donald. But it was Donald Trump and the Count from Sesame Street.
Yeah,
or the one you sent me, which was the screenshots from The Office.
Oh yeah.
Where the two characters are standing next to each other, and one is like leftists laughing at Trump losing, and then like liberals thinking we like Biden.
Yeah. Oh fuck. Yeah, that's basically been my life for the past week online.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I liked was there's many gritty memes, and I always love my gritty memes. If anybody doesn't know who Gritty is, I'll admit I've actually forgotten who the team is that he's the mascot for, but he was basically hijacked by Antifa activists as being the mascot for Antifa for memes. And one of my favourite ones was it was just a map. It was the electoral map with Gritty's face superimposed, and it was like 4 different panels, and over the course of the panels it was just an elongated sentence spread out that said, "Nice lead you got there, would be a real shame if somebody counted all the fucking ballots." I think maybe my number one favourite was one I sent you, where it was a video somebody had made, and it was a work of pure art with Trump on board a sinking ship. And it was footage of Trump dancing with that really awkward dance that he always does. There's like so many examples of footage out there of Trump doing this same dance, where it's mainly in the arms. And I noticed somebody pointed out online, actually it looks like he's jacking off 2 guys simultaneously. But it was him doing that dance on board the ship as it sinks, and the ship has the Republican Party logo on it, and there's this funky song playing. It's incredible. Another one I enjoyed was a riff on the ending of Avengers Endgame, where it's Trump shouting, "You took everything from me," and then Biden with his ice cream saying, "I don't even know where I am."
I believe it was Saturday when he was projected to be the president-elect, or whatever they call it over there in your United States that you have nowadays.
That they have now. Yeah.
My favourite moment, though, of the election, it's... Oh god, this is hard to... I have 2 favourite moments from this whole election shenanigan, but I think possibly the number one was the Four Seasons malarkey.
I knew we had to get there.
That is one of the greatest, the thick of it / Veep real life moments that has ever occurred.
It was epic.
So, in case for some reason someone who's listening doesn't know what it is...
First of all, how's the weather under your rock?
Upon learning that he had lost, Trump's lawyer, and recently fully exposed as a total creep in the new Borat movie, animated corpse that he is, said that there was massive evidence of voter fraud, and that they were going to do a press conference. Trump tweeted that the press conference was going to take place at the Four Seasons Hotel in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at which point it was corrected and it was actually taking place at Four Seasons Landscaping.
Absolutely stunning.
Also in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, after the Four Seasons Hotel tweeted, "It's not happening here."
Yeah, sorry, it's not here.
It's happening at Four Seasons Landscaping. So I can only assume that someone phoned up the wrong place, and whoever answered it was like, "Yeah, you can do it here." Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, we'll hold the press conference for you. And the screenshots of the press conference are like, it's delicious. Like, I could just eat that up all day.
My favourite bit of news coverage of this actually is from the reporter in The Independent, and they say when they actually phoned up the Four Seasons thinking, no, surely this is a mistake, it must be the Four Seasons Hotel. They phoned up the Four Seasons Hotel and a receptionist answered, and it says here, she was primed. I was obviously not the first person to call. And she said, "Yes, there has been some confusion about this," she said politely. "The press conference is not taking place here. It's taking place at Four Seasons Total Landscaping." The reporter says, "It's hard to explain the confusion I experienced as I sped along the highway out of downtown Philadelphia towards Four Seasons Total Landscaping. Was this one last act of revenge by the president against the lying fake news media while he still had her in rapt attention? Was it a ruse to get all the journalists out of town for when the results were announced? Truth be told, it didn't matter. However this turned out, Four Seasons Total Landscape was the story now." The very first paragraph of this report actually is epic. "It began, all as good 2020 capers do, with a tweet from the President of the United States. It ended with his personal lawyer in the parking lot of a landscaping company struggling to be heard over a man in his underpants shouting about George Soros." Yeah, everything about this story is sheer gold. I mean, if there's one perfect moment of communal catharsis that we can all enjoy, it is this. This makes 2020 almost worth it.
My second favourite moment from the election came from our own ridiculous-haired buffoon political leader, Boris Johnson, when, I don't know if you saw this, when Downing Street tweeted congratulations to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. It was basically a dark grey background with some text over it saying congratulations to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and we look forward to working with you and all that shit, right?
Yeah, but then, the invisible ink said otherwise.
Yeah, and then someone was like, if you change the background colour in Photoshop, you can see that there was previously poorly erased text underneath that said Trump.
That is incredible.
Obviously they've gone, oh, sorry, sir. Turns out it's Joe Biden that's won. Shall we do a different one? Boris is like, you know what? Just lazily erase the text that's there.
Yeah.
In
no one will know. It'll be fine.
Do you want us to just delete the layer? No. Just badly erase it instead.
The thing is, each of these last two farces we've just mentioned, I think they would be, if they were storylines in The Simpsons, each would be vying for me, trying to decide which was my favourite ever Mayor Quimby subplot. And amongst all the other hoo-ha that was happening on social media, one thing I did really start to enjoy coming across was the just plethora of pants-shitting takes and word salads spotted all over the place from those who would regularly, over the last 4 years, call other people snowflakes. People just having an absolute meltdown about how a Biden victory would mean socialism for the United States and the end to American liberty as we know it. And I'm thinking to myself, exactly how much overtime did Fox News have to commit to in order to convince these sad sacks en masse that Joe Biden, literally the world's most boring centre-right status quo dress mannequin, a default Sims avatar granted eerie sentience Joe Biden, a grouchy prison warden by day, affable dad by evening protagonist, and a cancelled after one season early 90s sitcom Joe Biden. Factory-produced creepy neoliberal uncle, a faded figure from a sun-bleached 1960s US Army recruitment poster Joe Biden. That he is somehow in fact an uber-communist revolutionary who, upon immediately seizing power, is going to abolish the Constitution, redistribute wealth, and hand the means of production to the proletariat. It's moments like this I really fucking wish I could live inside the mind of a Trumper. That delusion, that's where I want to live, man. Take me there, please.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I've also been enjoying AOC's Twitter feed. She's been having a great time this week. Just being like, Dems are wondering why the lead wasn't as big as they wanted. To summarise her tweets of the last week. I also enjoyed the fact that the day before the election was when Donald Trump, one of Donald Trump's fucking idiot kids anyway, said at a Donald Trump rally, "We want to make liberals cry again."
Good job.
Yeah, man.
You've made us cry tears of pure joy.
He fucked it big time.
I mean, as much as I did not want to be rubbing shoulders with people who are actively cheering for Joe Biden, I'm not gonna lie, man. Just watching all these Trumpers have an absolute meltdown is one of the most satisfying things that I've bore witness to in all my years on this planet. It was just epic.
Oh, my other favourite things were the musical memes, such as the Biden crime family are stealing the election guy, the beer, barbecue and freedom guy. Did you see him?
I don't think so. That doesn't sound familiar.
Oh god, right. So there was some. I'll need to send you the link so you can put it in the episode description. But so there was I think I can't remember what it was. It might have been Georgia. Someone was doing an announcement, and this guy just walked in the background wearing a tank top that says beer, barbecue, and freedom, and started shouting, "The Biden!"
strictly in that order.
Yeah, it's like, the Biden crime family is trying to steal the election. The Biden crime family is stealing the election. We want our freedom, Joe Biden. The Biden crime family is stealing the election. And he'd a mask sort of half hanging off his face, and
Oh, do you know what? I saw people reference that, and I didn't know what the reference was. Right,
but,
okay, I get it now.
But this guy was, you could tell every second he was there, he was waiting for and probably hoping someone would grab him and cart him off, but no one did, and he sort of just ran out of steam.
Nobody cares.
Yeah, he sort of ran out of steam and just walked off. And the guy at the podium's like, okay, so where was I?
To quote Space Ghost, nobody cares, Moby.
Yeah. And my other favourite one was Donald Trump's spiritual advisor,
I don't think I saw this.
Oh my god, right. Donald Trump's spiritual advisor, this absolutely fucking insane evangelical lady, was praying for Trump to win. And there's like footage of her at some convention somewhere, like speaking in tongues, but really, and being like, and saying that angels are coming from South Africa, angels are coming from South America, angels are coming from Africa. Yeah, and it's like the cover, victory, 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 cry with victory, and like people were making like amazing remixes of it. But also while she was doing that, there's some guy just walking around in the background reading a clipboard.
I noticed that. Yeah, I've realised I have seen that now. That's right, I have seen that. Yeah. Oh man, so much joy, so much joy.
It hurts my soul sometimes to think that there are people like that, but then, but the comedy value makes up for it.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, that was the good stuff. That was the good stuff, and I think the euphoria is just about passing now, and I'm kind of creeping into the sobriety of how we approach the new world that we've inherited. And I say new world, I really mean the old world, pretty much the one we had, and the one that actually led to Trump in the first place. So, yeah, change of tactics, folks. That's what we need. Glad Biden won, because it means myself and other leftists can go back to ripping Biden's warmongering neoliberal imperialist ass a new hole without being accused by wishy-washy bootlicking liberals of helping Trump win. Those days are gone. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah, back in your box, centrists.
Exactly. Thank fuck Trump is gone, and I can now go back to concentrating on my more regular hobby of hating liberals and centrists. To turn it into a more serious note just for a moment, obviously I'm saying that in a hyperbolic way, but you know what I'm saying is not dishonest. I want to bring up something actually. Our mutual friend Fielding Hope, who I seem to keep mentioning him lately.
Fucking might as well get Fielding in to like be a co-host of the podcast.
Fielding's a good follow on social media, by the way. He posts a lot of good stuff. But he said something this week. In fact, it was on the first night when it looked like things might go tits up. It's exactly something I would say. So since somebody else said it, I'm just going to say what he said. So, quoting what he said that night, the most horrible thing about this is it's not a fresh hell. It's just another stop on a death drive that Western liberal democracy has been on for a very long time. It's a long lineage of war, big money, neo-colonial and imperial power, obscene wealth procurement, strengthening police states, erosion of welfare support. Obama, Trump, Biden are all part of that lineage. It's all happening right here in the UK right now too, with Starmer and Boris. There needs to be another way. Solidarity and love to pals in America just now. And that pretty much summed up how I was feeling that night as well. And all of the main points of that about where neoliberalism has got us, I think that's entirely the truth of it. I mean, Fielding's been a bit more succinct about it than maybe I would be. I have a habit of using too many words. Us writers do that sometimes. But I think the point is we are at a place now where it is kind of 0 hour. We really do not have much more time to fuck around anymore to find a new way for the world to work, because there is all the damage that neoliberalism will still do to the planet in terms of damaging economies, damaging social cohesion across the world, promoting warfare. While all that is happening, we also have a pending environmental collapse to worry about. We need to sort this stuff out. And neoliberal capitalism, it really has to be dismantled. We cannot be having a debate about this anymore. The debate has to be, how do we go about it? That's the only debate to have right now. My worry about liberals is they've automatically, with Biden's election, a great deal of them have become a lot less interested in even having that conversation, because a lot of them, particularly the kind of white middle class liberals, have already gone back to sleep. And I've seen that online because I've seen people post things willy-nilly like, the nightmare is over, it's all done, we can pretend the last 4 years never happened. It's like, fuck you, man. That energy is not what we need. It's the last thing we need.
Here's the thing about what neoliberalism has done to politics in the last however long you want to look back on it. Decades. Mm-hmm. It's like fuel, right? Fossil fuels, petrol and stuff, because this is a good example of how this happens, right? So you go to a petrol garage, you go to put gasoline in your automobile, and they've hiked the price up by 15%.
Yeah. And
if you're a car driver, you're like, what the fuck, that's ridiculous. And they keep it at that price for a few months, and then they go, oh no, it's cool, we're dropping it. And they drop it by 5%. And you're like, whew, I'm getting a good deal now. And you're like, no, you're not. You're still paying 10% more than you were 6 months ago. Only now you've been fucking tricked into thinking you're getting a bargain, and you're not. And with Biden, I think liberals are tricked into thinking, oh, we're getting a bargain here because we've had 4 years.
Yeah,
of
totally.
Trump. It's like, anyway, you know what I mean. This is not a politics podcast, although it is.
This is a politics podcast within a non-politics podcast. But we are literally just getting a repeat of what we had before. I mean, Biden was literally Obama's vice president. This is just a repeat of what we had. The Democrats pretty much literally rolled out the red carpet for Trump. You know, they did very little to actually resist him. And the reason is, as much as many of them might object to Trump as a social phenomenon, they actually do not have that many qualms about him as a political phenomenon, except for the fact that he caused a lot of chaos domestically. But the main reason he caused chaos is really just because of his manner and because he pissed so many people off. The thing with Trump is he himself doesn't really even have an ideology. I mean, Trump is literally just a buffoon, and it just so happens that his self-interest is essentially just a non-intellectual version of the worst aspects of neoliberal conservative capitalism. That's just a coincidence. It doesn't make him an ideologue. It just makes him a fucking idiot, a useful idiot for a lot of people on the far right. And there's a lot of crossover, I'm sorry to tell liberals, between those interests and those of centrist neoliberals and centre-right neoliberals. There's a midgie's dick between them. If you don't know what a midgie is, it's a tiny, tiny biting insect that we get up here in Scotland. Very unpleasant in summer. So that's where we are, and I think really, I mean, looking at it for somebody in my own point, where I am as a leftist, what is my role in this? And I suppose my role is I need to figure out ways that I can be more instrumental in organising, and I think that's really what we all need to do, because that's where the power is going to come from. The last thing we want to be, now that the election is over, the last thing we want to be doing is encouraging people to think along the lines of, well, you need to wait for the next this or the next that, where the government allows you to participate in democracy. We need to get rid of this shit, because all of this stuff needs to be dismantled in the long run anyway. We need more direct forms of democracy in order to build societies that are actually going to be sustainable and are actually going to be non-predatory.
Here's the thing, civil servants need to go back to being that. They need to go back to being representatives of and working for the people, rather than being a different class. Absolutely.
Another problem we've got, particularly with kind of mainstream liberals, is their real love affair with the cult of personality. And they have that with Biden because they associate him with Obama, and they had a huge love affair with Obama. And it's not, to this day, it's not difficult to understand why. Obama was a very charismatic figure. He was a great orator. You know, he was very charismatic, very charming, obviously a very intelligent guy. The fact he was also an absolute classic neoliberal war hawk and uber-capitalist who did his best to bail out Wall Street and prolong the wars that George W. Bush had already been embarking on. You know, there is a real cognitive dissonance with liberals when it comes to this stuff, and it really is just because they fall too much in love with the illusion. And we have for a long time now been in a situation where governments are in the illusion business, particularly in the US, where the government is run almost like it's just another arm of the entertainment industry. And so image is important. And even with Trump, it was important because, yeah, he appalled liberals, but people on the far right and even not even the far right, but even people like classic Christian conservatives all across the United States loved Trump because they thought, well, this is just a straight-talking guy with some old-fashioned values. How they swallowed some of the bullshit lines that he would come out with, particularly about the Bible being his favourite book and shit like this. Those are things I cannot answer.
It's because he was telling them what they wanted to hear, you know.
That is basically
what he did a lot of. Unless we forget, right, he's still technically the head of the GOP.
This is also true.
He's still the highest rated, most voted Republican in history.
Yeah.
So whether he keeps to his promise and fucks off, or whether he hangs around, who knows? But either way,
we should actually specify at this point, at the time of our recording, this is the 11th of November as we speak, and at this moment, Trump is so far still refusing to concede the election.
Yeah. So yeah, we could.
Which,
do you know,
so on the other side of this podcast, maybe there's a coup. I don't know.
We might come out of this with total egg in our faces when we publish the podcast. And Donald Trump's had the result overturned by Scottish, and he's still the president.
I don't think that would disprove any of our points. It would actually hammer home the point that this mode of government is complete bullshit.
Yeah.
I was thinking earlier, do you know what they need to get Trump out of there? Let's say barricades himself in the White House.
They need Paul Gascoigne with a fishing rod and 4 cans of lager in a bag.
That would be my second choice. My first choice would be get Azealia Banks in there. Because Azealia Banks, the fact that she trolled Elon Musk from inside his own house for days on end is still maybe my favourite thing that's ever happened in the last decade.
Yeah, Azealia Banks' series of tweets from inside Elon Musk's home while waiting to collaborate with Grimes.
It's moments like this where I feel like if only we could harness Azealia Banks' energy purely for good. If we could weaponise her for the cause of good, it would be a powerful thing. But alas, that's not the world we live in.
No.
Before we move on out of this podcast within a podcast, I do want to address the issue of Kamala Harris quickly, because I can't brush over this since we've mentioned the cult of personality. Tied in with the cult of personality is also liberals' obsession with representation. And this is where things get a bit dicey when some leftists try and argue with liberals, because I've seen a lot of leftists, to me, these people aren't even leftists, to be honest, but there are leftists out there who just do not care about intersectionality and think that it should be purely a class war and that racism will somehow disappear as long as you address the class issue. The majority of leftists do believe this is bullshit, but there's a very loud minority who still hold this very hardcore Marxist-Leninist line. I'm bringing that up because even though those people are full of shit, there is nonetheless a definite problem when it comes to tackling how liberals deal with intersectionality in terms of how they value representation for the sake of representation. And by that I mean it's fine to have oppressors as long as those oppressors are diverse in terms of their gender and ethnicity and all the rest of it. We leftists out here are shouting for these oppressive structures to be dismantled. Liberals are like, why do you hate diversity? And that's a real bugbear certainly of mine when it comes to trying to have a civil discourse with liberals and trying to get them to see my point of view. When they come up with this shit, I really struggle sometimes with how to navigate through that conversation, because representation is definitely important. The problem is that these structures are not things that we should be looking to preserve. We should be looking to dismantle them and replace them with something that's more democratic, less oppressive. And sometimes getting liberals to understand that without them turning it around to, you just don't care about representation, can be fucking maddening. And Kamala Harris is a prime example of someone who, when she's brought up in this kind of conversation, it can get a bit dicey. Like, there is this bizarre need to diversify the makeup of oppression. I don't know why that exists, but I guess it's because liberals have convinced themselves that these structures are not oppressive for when they have their preferred superstars cast in the roles of the oppressor. In fact, the very nature of these structures only serve to consolidate inequality, white supremacy, and other forms of oppression. Kamala Harris, she was a district attorney. She's a super cop. And I already know that a lot of the liberals now swooning over Harris were just a couple of months ago joining leftists in the street with calls to defund the police.
Yeah.
What's happened to that energy? I mean, there should be no compromise on this. Defund, by the way, was already a compromise because the original phrase was abolish the police. And that's what we should be focusing on. We don't have time for me to dive into all the reasons why the police is an illegitimate institution and should be abolished. That's for another time. But I would encourage people to research it. It's not a crazy, crazy ask. Christ, there are even Hollywood celebrities who get it. Looking at you, Diane Guerrero. So, just read up, listen to people who are talking about abolishing the police, or if you don't like the word abolish, read into what defund actually means, because there's a lot of people out there particularly a lot of liberals who don't really engage beyond the surface, and they seem to think that means we will live in a lawless society if we get rid of the police. Guys, that's not what it means. The point is there's a lot of things the police do that the police don't need to be doing, and that could actually be run by social services and other forms.
There's a lot of stuff that police have to do that they don't want to do. You hear it even from police themselves. They're like, why is this our job? This is not the job of the police.
The other thing I would say on this is you don't have to take my word for it. Again, I am just other white dude on a podcast. You don't have to take my word for it.
Wait, are we related? That's also my surname.
What? I believe we are all related if you go all the way back. I think that's how whiteness started. You don't have to take my word for it. There's more than enough activists out there who are people of colour. There are many great ones online. I'm going to mention just a couple very briefly. There's a guy I follow who goes by the name Roderick Douglas, obviously a reference to Frederick Douglass. I don't know his real name, and I don't think he's ever given out his real name, and if I knew it, I wouldn't say it on this podcast. But he is very grassroots level. He's out there on the streets. He's organising communities. He's a great social media follow. He said this the other day, and I quote, "I think it's fine if you feel empowered by politicians who look like you winning office, so long as you ultimately understand that those politicians have nothing to do with our liberation. I sometimes feel empowered by four turtles who mutated and learned martial arts from a sewer rat. What's important is what we do with that energy." There's another guy I follow who goes by the name Angry Black Homo, and homo is spelled H-O-E, mo, as in ho, if you don't get the gag. He said the other day, "I'm frankly okay with not compromising or bending to the will of folks who think defund the police is too extreme, particularly since, as I've just said, defund was a compromise from a previous slogan of abolish the police. If you still believe that police can be reformed, or if you're just generally okay with keeping a fundamentally corrupt and oppressive institution in power, then you need to just be left behind, and I'll hope that it clicks for you someday. We're off reform in 2021. Get with it or get lost." And then he's posted a bunch of links where people can understand the phenomenon of defunding the police better. He's a great follow as well. I'll put links to those in the show notes, and if there's any others that I think of, I'll put those in as well. But I think it's important to mention this stuff because I don't want to be just, fucking old white commie anarchist ranting. I mean, people have been listening to people like me since the early 20th century, and I think our success has been generally limited, at least in terms of how it now applies to the world that we face in the 21st century. We need to be looking at ways to raise other voices, so that's what I'm trying to do. Before we end this edition of F Democracy, I just wanted to make a couple of small points. I am really looking forward to Kanye's next album, which I assume is going to be titled The Electoral College Dropout.
I'm looking forward to Kanye's next album, which hopefully is going to be called No You Can't.
That's worth 2 doses of candle after.
To be honest, that is a reworked Frankie Boyle joke. Shout out to Frankie Boyle.
God damn it. Yeah, last thing I just want to mention, I do think it's cool how the writers of 2020 have signed off in their mid-season break by undercutting this moment of centrist liberal triumph with a last-minute introduction of mutant mink COVID. That is good foreshadowing, masterclass stuff. And that wraps it up for this edition of F Democracy.
Toodle pet. So that was a top episode of F Democracy.
Good app.
Full of all the political insight that you expect from an episode of
nobody
F
asked for. All right, well, we better get to serious business.
Yes, we, as you know, any listeners who have listened to our last couple episodes will know we've been catching up on Season 4 of Fargo. Episodes 7 and 8 have aired in the time since we last recorded, so we're going to do a quick dive into those. Keep you up to date on our thoughts.
Yep. Episode 7 is titled Layaway. It was directed by Dana Gonzalez, who, as we discussed in our previous episode, also directed the previous 2 Fargo episodes. But it looked like there's been a bit of a Frankensteinian phenomenon here, where it was initially 2 episodes extended into 3, and I think I remember saying in our previous episode I definitely felt that the seams were showing a wee bit.
Yeah.
It was written by Noah Hawley and Enzo Maletti and Scott Wilson. In fact, that's the same writer's credit for episode 8 also. How do you feel about these two episodes, just generally?
I thought episode 7 was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed a bit more coherent than episode 6.
Yeah, I agree.
It seems like episode 6 maybe was the bits that they couldn't fit into episodes 5 and 7.
Yeah, I think this has proved my suspicion, the way these next two episodes have shaped up.
Episode 8 was full of surprises and shocks.
It certainly was. We'll get
to
that.
It blew me away, like I was in a Kansas City train station.
I will say, there is one thing I've been really missing from these recent episodes. I'm really missing Thurman, Ethelreda's dad. I really miss his energy. I miss his whole no filter, rambling around, trying to get to a point and trailing off on sentences and then just suddenly getting to the point in the final sentence and exiting scene. I really love what Andrew Bird is bringing to that role, and it always makes me smile and it makes me a bit sad that he's not here.
But I also have been missing Rabbi and Satchel these last two episodes.
Right, yeah. The show has doubled down on the mystery about where they've gone, although episode 7 does give us a possible destination. Alright, let's get into it then. Episode 7, Layaway. The interesting title. A layaway is basically a system of paying a deposit to secure something for later purchase. And I think on a thematic level it works several ways. First of all, there's the credit card thing that comes back to bite Loy Cannon in the ass in this episode when he sees the billboard for the Dinos card. I think also less literally, we have several characters here who are making quite risky plays. Whether they'll be able to honour the deposit.
Are their mouths writing checks
that their ass can't cash, that kind of thing. Right, first of all, Orietta and Dr. Harvard. Right, it's an important thing about this scene, James, that we have to tackle.
Yep.
This is the macaron/macaroon controversy.
She calls them macaroons.
She does, and as far as I know, these are macarons.
They are macarons. Anyone who watches the Great British Bake Off / Great British Baking Show will tell you they are macarons.
Mary Berry was fucking livid when she watched this scene. So I've always understood a macaroon.
It's a coconut biscuit.
A coconut sweet.
Yeah. A macaroon is basically like it's a soft coconut dough biscuit, usually topped with chocolate.
That's correct. And a macaron is what Orietta is made here, which is a meringue that is got fondant and whatnot, and that's a macaron, right?
Yep.
But who's made the mistake here? Because Dr. Harvard in the previous episode, he did say macaroons.
I wonder if there's some sort of... Is it like an American pronunciation, like aluminium?
I thought that, except for the fact I've listened to a couple of podcasts covering this show, and American audiences apparently are also confused about this.
Right. So do you think that maybe he meant macaroons and she mistook that as macaron?
Possibly.
Which might lead to his slight... like the...
Right. That's where I was going. Like maybe that's why he's a bit uncertain. Or is it just a pronunciation regional difference? I don't know. It's really confused me. But it was bothering me in that scene. I was like, those are not macaroons.
She does also say that macarons are Italian biscuits when I believe they're French. They were created by an Italian chef, but they're French.
I think the version that we now understand to be macarons are French, yeah. Alright, so some great performance notes in this scene. I did lol pretty hard. Now, we've already mentioned Dr. Harvard. Dr. Harvard was going maximum Dr. Harvard here. When he bit in the second bite of
second bite, yeah, specifically.
That was chef's kiss to that performance. That was just absolutely magnificent. He was really savouring that. I've actually written here in my notes, Dr. Harvard is clearly an alumni of Sunset Beach. Listeners, if you're not familiar with Sunset Beach, it was a late 90s daytime soap opera set in the titular Californian beach, fictional location, obviously. And it is unironically one of my top TV shows of all time. James, are you familiar with Sunset Beach?
I caught a few episodes back when it used to run on Channel 5.
It did, yeah. It was actually one of Channel 5's. Do you remember when Channel 5 first started? 1997.
It launched with the advertising campaign for Channel 5 was very like Technicolor and very primary colours. They had Spice Girls in the advert, and two of their flagship shows were Sunset Beach and Twin Peaks.
That's right. They reran Twin Peaks. Now, I do mean this unironically. Sunset Beach and Twin Peaks have way more in common than I think a lot of people appreciate. But anyway, this is not a Sunset Beach podcast, not yet. But yeah, I love Sunset Beach, and Dr. Harvard's performance here really reminded me of several characters from that show. Just that real exaggerated pantomime form of expressing emotion, expressing delight specifically. Yeah, it was great stuff. So he collapses. We realise that the macaron runes are poisoned. Orietta also giving it some Sunset Beach here by giving herself a selection of screams, and then she seems to pick the least convincing one.
The performance is incredible.
Actually, I've got to mention, before we get to that, there's all the shushing as she goes into his drawer to get the letter from Ethelreda. As he's grunting and thrashing around on the floor, she's shushing him and brushing crumbs from him. It's great stuff. Great direction. So she steals the letter and exits with the very unconvincing scream. And as far as we knew at that point, Dr. Harvard was doomed.
At least Orietta certainly did.
Yeah. So we then follow up with where we finished for the previous episode, and it's poor Antoine Domine who is face down in the dirt. In classic Calamita fashion, there's zero sympathy on show, and he's talking about Rabbi Milligan, and he's saying to Josto, he killed Mario, which I'm guessing is the guy he shot in the previous episode. He choked your sister. I had actually completely forgotten that Antoine was actually married to Josto's sister, but yeah, it is his sister. So he's Calamita doing his bit to amp up Josto's anger here, I felt. Josto actually says to Calamita, kill whoever you have to. And he says to leave Antoine in the dirt for the birds to feed on, which I thought was a wee bit harsh.
It was pretty cold. But here we can see this is the start of what I've written down here is Josto's grand plan.
Right, yes. Yep. But poor Antoine, we got that sob story from him the previous episode, and this is Josto's brother-in-law. Yep. It's like, fucking hell, poor guy. Anyway, we then transition to the Cannon Gang, and Loy goes nuts and starts beating up Leon, who's Lemuel's jazz driver. And we get this guy, Opal, who has been hanging about in the back, who it looks like has been promoted to Dr. Senator's position.
Don't you say his name.
Right, yes, sorry, I'll keep that name out of my mouth. But Opal clearly already regretting this promotion because this is a poisoned chalice.
Yeah.
'Cause he is not cut out for this role.
That guy's performance.
He's doing his best, bless him.
That guy's performance in the last two episodes is brilliant, man. It's just the guy's like,
He's absolutely fantastic. It's that we'll get there when we get there, but yeah, when he's faced with Deafy in episode 8, it's like, how the fuck do I handle this? He's just got that look of someone who hates his job because he did not ask for this level of responsibility and does not know what to do with it. During this scene where Loy is beating up on Leon, Opal says, remember he's Happy's cousin. And we've heard this mentioned before. So clearly this Happy guy who is Leon's cousin is somebody important. Do you think we're going to find out who this Happy guy is?
I wonder is Happy connected to New York? Because we also find out, I can't remember if it was 7 or 8 because I watched them back to back, but we find out that like Loy has like New York connections as well, and I'm wondering if Happy is from New York or if Happy is local, but I guess we will find out.
Yeah, we'll put a pin in that on the Happy watch.
Unless it's like, this is me speaking as a quote-unquote Fargan, but you have mentioned that there are occasional connections between different seasons of Fargo. Maybe this is a connection to a forthcoming season. Maybe it'll be revealed as to be a connection to one that's already been on. Who knows?
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time the show's done that if that's the case. So some good Deafy and Otis action in here, that most awkward of team-ups. Deafy really twisting the knife into Otis here, clearly knows what he's up to, and Otis just squirming more and more. I do like some of Deafy's turns of phrase in this episode, like saying that a little birdie told him that Otis knows this and Otis was up to that, and of course there is no little birdie. He knows all this because he's been spying on him. Yep. He also keeps using the word palomino, which is like a slang extension of pal. And a palomino is also, as you're probably aware, most people, it's a kind of horse. Yeah, it's kind of gold-coated horse. But curiously, because my rudimentary Spanish informs me that palomino is also a word that actually means a baby pigeon. And so when he says, a little birdie told me,
Ah.
it makes me think he's actually saying to Otis, you told me.
Yeah. I did not know that that translation was a thing.
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd one. I don't know how it came to be the name of a horse, but in Spanish that is certainly what it means. So meanwhile, the Smutney home slash Undertakers is now being used by the Cannon gang as a place to store stuff. We get a wee bit of quiet flirtation between Ethelreda and Lemuel, or at least she seems a bit awkward in his company. And while Lemuel's lugging in some boxes,
He has a bit of
we
an
get
X-Files moment.
he does. We get this episode snowman moment. I've written here Adam's family shenanigans. I guess I was thinking along the lines of Thing.
What I've got is, if any house is going to be haunted, it might as well be a funeral home.
Well, this is true. Yeah, what is Snowman up to? The snowman walking in the air. I'll let Jones drop.
Are you for Hitler or against Hitler? Whatever they say, it's the opposite. They never tell the truth.
Yeah, the supernatural elements are like coming more thick and fast as this season progresses.
Yeah, this season has definitely pushed the boat out on that front. We've not had anything like this degree of this before. So this is really... I'm now suspecting the snowman must appear in every episode. And we just did not notice the episodes where we thought he wasn't there. So I suspect he's doing a Captain Howdy in the background somewhere in each of these episodes. But yeah, each subsequent episode he's pushing it more to the front. Okay, I did make a note here of something that I'm a wee bit frustrated with still, and I do still feel there are structure problems. We're definitely over the hump of those last couple of episodes where I think you could see where it had been stitched together. I do feel, though, there is still a bit of a structure problem with this season generally. I'm a bit frustrated we've had so little Ethelreda in the last few episodes, as well as having so little of Orietta. I feel like there is a bit too much on the table in this show, and there's just not enough to go around, you know? I'm a wee bit disappointed with Ethelreda, particularly because I kind of expected she was going to be like the unofficial amateur detective in this show. Fargo usually has a detective that you can sympathise with, and because the cops in this season are so crooked, I kind of assumed, and you know what happens when you assume, but still, I kind of thought maybe that's where it would go. At the very least, I thought she would have more of a proactive role. I mean, we are now 8 episodes out of 11, and I'm like, this is not it's not where I expected her to be, like so pushed so far into the background at this stage. I don't know, how do you feel about that?
I feel like up to the point where she wrote the letter, I thought she was going to be like a total linchpin of the plot of the show. But again, I feel like the last couple of episodes did really take a step back from certain plot elements to focus on like the gang war. And I wonder if it is just like the juggling match of all the different threads is getting a bit of a juggling match, like competitive juggling. Sorry, if like the juggling act of all the like disparate threads of plot is a bit wild, which means that we're not getting as much of certain things as we would like. But I will say I trust Noah Hawley to do his thing, but I would have liked to have seen more of Ethelreda if she existed in the show, just to do that one thing, to like expose Orietta. Then I don't know.
I will say this is definitely the messiest season of Fargo so far in terms of how it's structured, and that's just bothered me a wee bit. It's not. I mean, I am loving everything the show has given me. Pretty much, there's very little in this show that I'm not enjoying for what it is. But structure-wise, in terms of how it's all been put together, I am a wee bit dissatisfied. And I think it's because there is so much going on. There's so many characters in this season. It's the biggest ensemble Hawley's ever worked with, easily. I kind of feel, as much as he pushed the boat out by asking FX for that 11th episode, the more that we get into this, the more I feel like this would actually been better if it had been a Doom Patrol season 1 with 15 episodes, because there's more than enough material here.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I dare say there'd be critics that would say it was overlong and drawn out, and I say to that, well, you can't win, because already there's plenty of critics complaining anyway. So
to those critics, I would say, do you even Fargo, bro?
Exactly. Yeah. To quote Billy Joel. All right, so Calamita is on the trail of Rabbi and Satchel. He goes back to the Fada place, to the room that they share. Is Calamita secretly Will Graham from Hannibal? Because how does he walk into this room and hear their voices? Because he hears them playing Marco Polo.
Yeah.
And then I've got a second set of notes here saying, Marco Polo, what the fuck is with that game? Because that is one of those weird games they have in the States. I don't think it exists in any other country. And it's specifically a water game. Like, people play it in swimming pools. And it's blind man's bluff, but in a swimming pool. Which makes it all the more perplexing as to why Satchel and Rabbi were playing it in this room. What was going on?
That's fucking weird when you put it like that. I didn't know that Marco Polo was a strictly water-based game.
It is, yeah.
Therefore, making it water polo.
Now, I don't get. Listen, I'm not in the habit of taking things too literally when I watch TV shows, but I just.
Do you even Twin Peaks The Return, bro?
Precisely. But I just thought it was a strange choice that they chose to have that audio over that scene of Calamita. Oh, by the way, detail I loved, him crossing himself before he opens the Bible. I thought it was really cool. And then finding the little flyer for the place in Kansas. It was a strange stylistic choice, but I was getting heavy Will Graham vibes. But anyway, the flyer is for a feed and seed. It's basically a general store in a place called Liberal, Kansas. Now, incidentally, Liberal, Kansas is a real place. And the Wikipedia page for Liberal, Kansas tells us this. Early settler S.S. Rogers built the first house in what would become Liberal in 1872. Rogers became famous in the region for giving free water to thirsty travellers. Reportedly, the town gained its name from the common response to his acts of kindness. That's very liberal of you. All right, so we get what I think is the big scene in this episode at the warehouse where Josto and Abel Violante go to tell Loy Cannon, essentially, your son is dead. This is a super risky play by Josto.
Can we just take a moment here to
Sure.
break down Josto's apparent plan here? Because this is like Captain America Civil War / Batman v Superman levels of convoluted planning by Josto.
It is, yeah.
So Josto has told Calamita, kill whoever you have to.
Yep.
Then he goes and tells Loy that Calamita killed Satchel.
That Calamita kills Satchel and Rabbi. So he's taking it for granted that Calamita will be successful for one thing, which, I don't know, you want to be making those kind of bets there, Josto, but...
And then tells him that he understands that it's blood for blood, but instead of killing his son, can he kill Gaetano instead?
Mm-hmm.
And then go and kill Calamita.
Yep. That's
and he's like,
basically it.
that's our deal. And then we're good. And if you do that, I'll give you more territory and we'll be equal partners.
That's essentially it, yep.
Yeah. So this all relies on, one, Loy believing all of this.
Yep.
Two, Loy not finding out. It relies basically a lot on Loy being ignorant of everything, and then Loy specifically killing Gaetano is a big part of it.
Right, exactly. I think maybe, going back to one of the kind of running themes of this season that I think we've touched on before, the idea, there is the theme of white supremacy here. It is quite feasible that someone in Josto's position does just see Loy as ignorant, and he does underestimate his intelligence here. There is also that he could be banking on Loy being so suspicious of making a deal with white men, that even if he faces Calamita and Calamita is able to tell him that no, that's not how it happened, he's not going to believe him. Why that logic kind of breaks down is that he's still relying on Loy to believe him, Josto. So yeah, there's definitely some holes in this.
Like I like that he's, I think part of the plan is he's assuming that Calamita will go and kill someone else,
right,
in Loy's gang, possibly another one of Loy's relatives, as we see him almost like attempt to do, and that will back up Josto's story. But again, Josto underestimates nearly everyone.
I suppose the trump card he's got
it.
is he knows Calamita is cold-blooded, that Calamita will kill if he has to kill. So I guess he's not worried about that aspect. But the rest of it really relies on a lot of dominoes falling a very specific way. So this, when he delivers the news, first of all, now I actually love Abel Violante in this scene, because he's like trying to doing the old school thing of, hey, there are rules, there are people you can't kill and so forth, and And he clearly thinks that Josto has just gone completely off the rails here. And I love that actor's performance in that scene. There's some really good stuff. But Josto is taking over. He's making the deal that he wants to make. Huge risk, because hearing your son's been killed, there's a limited number of ways that guys in Loy's position are going to react to that.
Yeah.
So there was a definite huge risk here. You know who he needed to actually broker this deal and break this Loy canon? Thurman Smutney. You go, well, it's like this, Law. You see, there's a thing where, it's Calamita, and you see, yeah, you'll have to kill him and kill Gaetano. And anyway, your son's dead. Sweet dreams. But anyway, this is maybe the biggest layaway in the episode, I would say. So I feel like this is where that title really, really hits home the hardest. Now, it does not quite go to plan. Loy does not want to be manipulated, and he feels he will not be dragged into the dirt. That I think, going back to that theme, he's not going to be yanked in the direction that the white man is trying to yank him in, basically. However, we should make mention of the fact it's not that he does not consider it, because we do have that chilling scene where Zero's in the bathroom, and we see Loy outside prepared to garrote him, which I was like, I was fully prepared for that to happen. I was like, okay, we're going to kill a child.
I thought that was going to happen.
Because I guess the way I saw it unfolding was Loy would do that, and then he would later find out that Satchel wasn't dead, and then he would have to reckon with the fact that he had needlessly killed a child. Which I feel like is something that Loy would struggle with more than Josto, like if the situation was reversed.
I think so. I really enjoyed Loy/Chris Rock's monologue about, like what you were saying, about not being dragged down into the dirt. Not because he doesn't want to be, but because if he does, he just proves that he is what they think he is by trying to drag him down, and he has to try and be better than they see him. I thought that was really good, and I think that worked a lot towards him not just outright choking him, but you can tell, man, that scene where he's standing outside the bathroom holding the cord, I was like,
yeah,
I've never seen anyone wash their hands for so long, man. I mean, especially nowadays in times of COVID, you expect people to wash their hands for a long time, but man, that hand washing went on for a long fucking time.
It did.
That was some Reservoir Dogs levels of take your time washing your hands.
Yeah. That was some Tarkovsky levels of a hand-washing scene.
David Lynch was just going to come in and just say, who gives a fuck how long a hand-washing scene lasts?
Yo, dog, I heard you like floor sweeping. Let me introduce you to hand-washing. That's some more Twin Peaks Return references for you kids. So, Loy is clearly convinced. There's no doubt in his mind that Satchel is dead. That seems certain. And I did find all this pretty devastating. Loy is a complicated character. He's not entirely sympathetic. I mean, he can't be because of his position and because of some of the things we see him do. But he does have a more of a human side than I'd say Josto does. Josto's human side is still an arsehole.
Yeah.
He's got the criminal side, and then he's got the human side who's an arsehole. Whereas Loy's got the criminal side, and then he's got the human side that is actually in a strange way quite likeable. And yeah, to see him accept Satchel's death is actually pretty devastating. The scene where he delivers the news to his wife, Buell, and then we just hear her scream, I actually thought that stuff was really nicely put together. I did find that really affecting, and it was there's always this point in each season of Fargo where I was like, okay, we've hit the actually I was going to use the word nadir, and oddly enough, the nadir is the title of episode 8. But there is always that moment. It's like, okay, the characters are at their absolute lowest. Mm-hmm. This is where anything goes, basically. So it's shortly after that in the episode that Opal, good old Opal, is driving Loy around. Loy asks him to stop, and that's where he sees the billboard of the Diners Club poster.
I never thought I would feel so sorry for someone who was trying to invent the credit card as in that
I know,
moment, but it's kind of heartbreaking when he
is.
realises his idea has been stolen from him.
I want to call out Chris Rock's performance in that scene. Just the absolute resignation in his face I thought was really quite excellent. I think some critics, and I think I've mentioned this in the podcast before, some critics have really criticised Chris Rock for basically not acting enough. I think he's doing just enough, and I think it's these wee subtle touches that are actually really perfect. I think he conveyed exactly the amount of just sheer hopelessness in that one brief moment.
Yeah.
There was and I liked that there was no dialogue. That topped it off for me. I actually thought that was a perfect scene. The Diners Club International, DCI, is a real charge card company, and it was formed indeed in 1950 by a guy called Frank McNamara. And apparently, your typical rich white dude, basically the story is he went out for dinner one time and he'd forgotten his wallet, and so his wife had to get the tab, basically. And then he went to the restaurant the next day and said, hey, what about if I gave you a card with my signature on it? And apparently he gave them literally a cardboard card. Rich white dude's gonna rich white dude, but that apparently is how that idea started. There is, I mentioned it on a previous episode, there is some muddiness around this about who was the first person to do this though, but they all start arising around the same time. Whether or not there was a real life Loy Cannon, obviously that's Noah Hawley's invention. I don't think it's far-fetched, however. I'm not saying it happened, I'm just saying it wouldn't be the first time that a person of colour has been fucked over in this way in the history of all things great in American capitalism, so it works pretty well as a parable. Okay, we get a brief scene also in this episode with Zelmare and Swanee. Loy is helping them leave, mainly out of his own recalcitrance, it seems. He just does not want to play the game that's been laid out for him. I did enjoy this scene where it was the three of them and Otis in the same room. I thought that's a nice collection of oddball characters in one scene. That was like something out of an old movie. It just had that vibe about it of a hapless protagonist. The whole mise en scène of it, with those two louche characters just draping themselves around him and clearly getting the better out of him, and him not having a clue what's been said.
I loved Otis's reaction where he's like, yeah, "You're wanted." Like you're.
Yes, yeah, great stuff. And I loved Swanee's line. It's been a sad parade. Yeah, that might have been my eye of the duck of that episode. I just loved that wee short scene.
It was classic, yeah, Bob.
Yeah, it was like golden age of Hollywood style acting. It was amped up to just a few degrees above what we now generally accept as quote unquote normal acting in the 21st century. Mm-hmm. So the end of this episode, Gaetano is still strapped to the chair in the warehouse, and he's back to being his panto hard man. And at this point, I'm like, okay, what is this character? And this seems to be a question I've been asking about this fucking character all season long. I still don't get an answer. Anyway, the upshot is Loy lets him go. Opal, the low-rent senator, is clearly worried about this. He's like, you sure you know what you're doing? And the episode leaves us without an answer to that question.
Yeah, because it's Loy's turn to have a Josto-style, you assume this is going to work moment. There's a really good line in episode 7 where Loy talks about dreamers, and he says... I can't remember who it is, but he says a type of person that's a dreamer you can fleece. It's like who a con man's after. And
good catch.
Dreamer is a term that's used in the United States, particularly in political circles, to refer to basically illegal immigrants. There's like a Dreamer Act where if someone makes their way like as an asylum seeker or whatever to America, in liberal circles in particular, they're referred to as dreamers.
Right,
because they come to America with the dream of making it. I thought the way he says that about someone being a dreamer that you can fleece, that was very, very on the nose.
Yeah, it's a good catch.
Yeah,
there is a lot of that going on in this season. It is a wee bit on the nose, but I feel like Noah Hawley is generally good with that kind of stuff. He can do it on the nose and make it work most of the time. So before we move on to episode 8, 5s out of 9 to go with our Mr. Robot themed scoring system.
I would give episode 7 6.5 5s out of 9.
That's exactly what I've went with. 6.5 5s out of 9 for episode 7.
It's coming up out of the mid-season slump, and to be fair, the mid-season slump that Fargo season 4 is having is not as bad as many mid-season slumps I've seen shows have. I think we're just holding it to a higher standard because of the creator and the quality. But yeah, this episode seemed to be like ramping it up again.
I will also reiterate, I don't think that mid-season slump is as bad as a lot of critics are saying it is as well. There's a lot of critics I feel are overstating just how kind of detrimental this has been to the season. I mean, I've voiced my own frustrations about the structure, but I don't think it's as bad as... I don't know if you've checked out any of the reviews, but a lot of the reviews are really quite hard on this aspect of the season. And also on the casting, they're not happy with a lot of the casting as well. I have zero problems with the casting on this show.
Good work.
All right, episode 8, The Nadir, is directed by Sylvain White. Sylvain White, incidentally, is the director of Stomp the Yard. Do you remember Stomp the Yard? It was a kind of mid-2000s dance drama. It was very popular with quote unquote the kids.
Ah.
He also directed the Slender Man movie. So that's interesting.
Wow.
Which,
The horror movie.
Which you would not guess for this episode, because I thought this was a very tightly directed episode.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we begin.
We begin with one of the funniest future son-in-law dinner chats I've seen.
We've got the intercut juxtaposition of Josto at the table with his intended betrothed, who is the daughter of the mayor, and that's intercut with Josto, shall we say, frolicking with Orietta. There's a lot of very slovenly up-close meat-eating going on, which I was not particularly a fan of.
The steak just bulging out of his teeth was gross.
And intercut with shots of Orietta's feet. At this point, I've written in my notes, Quentin Tarantino, is that you? So the mayor is wanting to kind of... Seems like he wants to push the brakes on this a wee bit, this arrangement. He's worried that he might lose the election. I think we might infer probably due to the recent upsurge in violent crime in the city. Now this, I have to say, is a flimsily developed subplot so far, because we've only really seen this dynamic once in the season prior to this. I'm a little bit unclear on what exactly Josto is angling for with this arrangement. I mean, I get the common things. It's an avenue to greater power, greater respectability, but I just feel it's not been fleshed out enough for me.
He talks about like getting dead people to vote.
Right. Yes.
It's given all like all the Republicans being up in arms last week about claiming that thousands of dead people voted for Joe Biden. I was like, that was timely.
How did Noah Hawley tell the future?
Because he's part of the liberal conspiracy, obviously.
Clearly,
yeah. But that made me laugh.
So yeah, the juxtaposition of these two scenes was definitely really funny. I did do some proper lols with this.
I liked when she was suffocating him with the "bless this mess" pillow.
It's the live, laugh, love of its time.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But yeah, once we get deep into this scene in Orietta's apartment, there's some really great, interesting dialogue between these two characters. You know what's fun about this scene, actually, and what I really liked about it? Both of these characters deliver exposition in this scene about themselves, and that's the kind of thing that can really go badly.
Yeah.
And I thought it was actually handled really well here, because it's played in a way that not only the information conveyed through the dialogue tells us about the characters, but the way they each behave in hearing it also tells us more about the characters. Because Josto is almost kind of oblivious to what Orietta actually says, which I'll get into in a second. Mm-hmm. And Orietta is interestingly also kind of oblivious to what it is she's actually even saying about herself.
You get the impression she doesn't understand the whole
reason
why she was...
No, she does not understand. It's pretty clear she has no idea.
A kind of a malaise.
Yeah. So let's get into what she says here. She makes mention of the fact that her mother really took care of her because she was always poorly as a child. She had, quote unquote, as you've just said, a kind of malaise that the doctors seemed to struggle with, could not find a root cause, it seems like. And her mother would comfort her with, quote unquote, her special juice. And it's like, okay, this is obviously Munchausen's by proxy situation going on here. And they wouldn't have had a name for it at that time, which I guess is why it would not have been diagnosed, and it's quite unlikely anybody would even suspected that's what was happening. But it makes so much sense for Orietta's character that she becomes, in a way, so obsessed with her own vocation as a nurse that it becomes kind of deadly, as if there's something in her subconscious that tells her that the act of caring has to also be an act of murder. It's some quite beautiful dark poetry, but when she's telling Josto this, he's completely oblivious. He just does not get, I believe his reply is, speaking of special juice.
Yeah. I loved when she basically refers to her mother as a saint, and he's all like, what saint? And then starts listing saints. She's like, what one does she remind you of? Like, it's the most
patron
asshole,
saint of me.
Yeah, the most asshole literal response you could have.
Yeah, it was the pure actually guy.
It was the guy coming out of the well in the meme.
Orietta's legacy here of Munchausen by proxy as a victim of that did sort of make me think that there is kind of she's in a similar position to Otis Weff, whose OCD I think is something at this time would never have been diagnosed either.
Yeah.
Like these are people who are both completely adrift in their own ailments that people just think are a bit odd, and they don't really understand it's actually a medical problem. Josto, for his part, he strongly intimates here that he was sexually abused by Rabbi Milligan's father, the fantastically named Oni Yiddles Milligan. So this definitely adds a dark tone to this scene. And it definitely adds a darker edge to Josto's character. Maybe explains a bit more why he is as broken as he is, in terms of how he views personal relationships. It's all a bit muddy, it's all a bit weird. So Josto mentions that he is engaged to be married. He just mentions it so off the cuff. Orietta has an extremely bad reaction to this news, I think it's fair to say. While Josto is in the bathroom and she's ruminating on this, she decides to check up on Dr. Harvard and receives the shock news that Dr. Harvard is actually making a full recovery. So wow, that was a revelation. There's another thing I did not see coming.
Yep, things go real bad for Orietta here.
And this is where we get the beginning of what I've called the Orietta Stomp DM. This physical acting here by Jessie Buckley when she's doing this. I mentioned her odd posture before, like it's the posture of a much older woman, and that it's clearly an affectation. And I think here in this performance you see much more clearly, oh, this is definitely an affectation. Like she's practiced this so much that it becomes like pure, like kind of hyper real pantomime when she gets in a real hectic emotional state. Like this exaggerated stomping is so comical to look at.
Yeah.
But this is her in a full peak of anger, and it's like something straight out of a silent comedy.
You're right. It's brilliant physical performance, man. I called it I had it down as the Orietta panic waddle, because like the fact that we both made notes on the way she's walking, so it speaks volumes. As to
Yeah,
how funny
it's
is.
beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying Josto's declaration of love here.
This sort of sums up their whole relationship that they've had so far. None of them pay attention to each other at any point, and they're constantly misunderstanding each other or sending wrong signals. And I thought it was like a weird mirror of back when he never knew who she was, and then now she's declaring his love, and she's like, "Get the fuck out of my house."
All I can say is that Hand Shandy Hymn of the Republic must have really worked wonders on a guy. But here he is declaring his love, and I love the line he says, I feel I could feel pretty rejected here, and she's going absolutely start raving mad. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, poor Josto. Let's just stay with Orietta for a minute, because we only see her briefly again for a similarly bizarre sequence. She's at the hospital trying to check up on Dr. Harvard. She finds out from a colleague that he's been moved to a special hospital, and he's got police guard around him because they suspect criminal involvement, suspected murder, and they suspect that it is probably related to the benefactor to the hospital who was shot dead in the earlier episode. So yeah, thing is really not going Orietta's way. We get a reprise of the Orietta stomp all the way to her apartment. So she's packing up, fully prepared to leave town, it seems like. She goes into the Chief Wiggum closet of mystery, and lo and behold, finally we get the payoff with Ethelreda's journal. So she finally puts two and two together, compares the handwriting, and she realises it's Ethelreda who has tried to shop her. So, how is this going to go down is my question, because Orietta is very much definitely in the shit as soon as Dr. Harvard wakes up and starts talking, right?
Yep. And she's clearly packing up and heading out of town. So is she going to take the time to exact revenge? Is she going to take Ethelreda with her?
Right, this is what I'm wondering. Is she somehow going to enlist Ethelreda against Ethelreda's will? Is she going to exact revenge on Ethelreda? Some combination of the two? Is she going to try and implicate Ethelreda somehow? What's her plan going to be? Because she's got to have one. Because it stopped her in her tracks, this revelation. So... yeah, I don't know. Meantime, let's go back to Josto. Josto, feeling a bit full of himself, looking all smug in the back of the car, gets to the Fada headquarters, and of course, we get the return of Nacho Libre. So there's Gaetano sitting there being released. Now, what did you think was going to happen here? Because part of me was thinking, is Josto just going to get killed off?
I 100% thought this was the end of Josto. I thought they've had him declare his love for Orietta. He's just going to go back here and he's going to die. Because in my mind now, I always have you telling me your favourite characters will die in this show. Yeah. And also, as you said, double acts always get split up.
Right, exactly.
And I was like, well...
nobody is safe in this show. That's something that's been through every season. So I'm fully prepared for main characters to just bite a bullet at any point.
So as you can probably imagine, when Nacho Libre Gaetano starts beating the shit out of Josto, I was like, here's the end. But I was not expecting the ultimate payoff of that action.
No, this was a bizarre turn of events. And I have mixed feelings about whether or not it works. But Gaetano basically says... I'm the lion, you're the snake. Although he later says I'm the bull and you're the chameleon. He's definitely mixing his animal metaphors. But the point of it, he admires Josto's strategic wit, basically. And that he's the brawn and Josto is the brain and that they're better working together. And that he's more than happy now to swear loyalty to Josto.
Part of me feels like it kind of makes sense that finding out that Josto is ruthless would make him go, okay, you're worth following. Because the reason he was constantly fucking around behind Josto's back was because he didn't respect Josto in any way. It wasn't just for the fuck of it, it was because he thought Josto was a weak-ass boss. Yeah.
Here's the thing I like about it. It's always fun when a character that we think we know behaves in a way that surprises us, and then you start to eventually see the logic in it. I agree, it's not that much of a stretch. It did take me by surprise, and I had to kind of sit for a minute with it. But I mean, I can see how it makes sense. Where I'm struggling with it though is I feel like in a previous episode, this show had told us that Gaetano was really all bravado. Like in that scene where Zelmare and Swanee turn up and start shooting the place up, Gaetano is quite clearly shitting his pants at that point. All of his bravado disappears, all of his hard man facade just melts away. He's so panicked he shoots his own guy. So I'm a wee bit confused about how this ties in with this sense of loyalty and this apparent continued badassery. In fact, we can skip ahead a wee bit and also tie this into how it applies to the ending of the episode, where he goes all a bit fucking Butch Cassidy. And he goes out there, guns blazing.
I've got it down here. He does him a cherry on fat. Like.
Right. That is not the Gaetano that we saw in the episode where Zelmare and Swanee attack. I feel like there's definite inconsistency here for me. The only thing I can think that made sense for me, and this is the note that I made, and it's a bit far flung, but the only thing I can think is, does he have a fear of women? Because like a member of ISIS in the face of the YPJ, if you don't know what the YPJ is, they're the female Kurdish fighters in Rojava, and ISIS, the hardcore Islamist fundamentalists, one of their things is it's the greatest dishonour to be killed on the battlefield by a woman. And so one of the things that actually strikes fear into them, and one of the reasons why the YPJ were so effective in the battlefield, is that they were terrified of women on the battlefield, and even the sound of a woman's voice on the battlefield could cause them to just lose their wits. Basically, that's just an aside. By the way, incidentally, hashtag plug for forthcoming book that might never part of Codex Widdershins is set in Syria, as you know, James.
Yep.
I do actually. I wanted to mention this to you before, but it just seems like a good place to place it in. I do have a character in there who is an international volunteer with the YPJ, who is actually a death metal singer. And when she's on the battlefield, she just shrieks. And that's how it strikes terror into the hearts of the ISIS fighters. I'm just mentioning that here because I thought you'd dig that. But this is not a podcast about my writing, except when it is. So that was the only thing I could think. I can see no other reason as to why he suddenly became a completely different character when faced with Zelmare and Swanee as he does when he's facing off against male antagonists. What do you think?
I don't know, because does he know that Zelmare and Swanee are women when he's shouting?
Well, I suppose that's a good question, but he did see them from the window when they were approaching the house.
But they came in with other people though, right?
They did, so he might not necessarily have put it together. But it's the only thing I can think of.
Part of me, if I was making logical leaps here, and these are leaps, these are not stepping stones, these are like, but
these are Neil Armstrong jobs.
He has some pride that he has to lay hands on Josto for what he did. but at the same time, he is also a bit of a coward. And he's like, well, shit, if he's going to be that ruthless, I should probably back down. And it becomes less of a respect thing and more of a fear thing. Maybe controlling Gaetano is about making him fear for his life. And he's like, I guess I have to fucking fall in line now. You know, and his bravado drops. And then, later in the episode, he's a bit pissed.
That's true.
So, you know, maybe it was just... Maybe
he's full of the Irish bravery.
Because
he's full of the special juice. I'm saying Irish bravery, by the way. I realise he's Italian, but they are drinking Irish whiskey, and that's in case somebody wants to try and correct me.
He does look almost surprised that he scares them off at the end. Like, there's like the camera's on his face, and he's got a look of almost like, shit, did that work? You know? Okay,
alright. I still struggle with it a wee bit. Do you know, honestly, of all the stuff that I'm getting with the show, outside of some of my small quibbles with the structure, the only thing the show's given me that I'm not entirely liking is all to do with Gaetano. Gaetano is the character I really struggle with most. I feel like he's more of a cartoon character than a human being, and also he's turning out to be a bit of an inconsistently drawn cartoon character. It's bothering me a wee bit. I just cannot quite get a handle on what this character is supposed to be.
Like I said, I'm making leaps to try and like piece all these together.
The other possibility is he's playing some kind of long con with Josto. I don't know. We'll see. I did note Ebal Vigilante is deeply disturbed by this alliance. And the camera lingers on him a couple of times to let us know that. Ebal Vigilante is a man who has his wits about him, as we know. So I'm trusting Ebal Vigilante's judgment here. I feel like this is not going to go well.
Mm-hmm. So
all of this takes the wind out of Loy Cannon's plan somewhat. So he has to resort to plan B. And I did enjoy his delivery when he just says, Fargo.
Yeah, roll credits.
So that sort of sets the scene for what eventually happens in the final scene of the episode. So meanwhile, our other characters, let's go at the Smutneys. So over at the Smutneys' house, we get the first of what I think are two great head-to-head scenes between two different sets of characters. And it's Loy's wife, Buell, goes to visit Debrel Smutney. In fact, she's really there to see Lemuel and tell him that Satchel is dead. I love this dialogue here where Buell is making it clear at first to Debrel that there's no point in asking for help. Like, just because there are two women in this scenario, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
And I like Debrel's fortitude in saying, well, kind of, we'll see about that. At the end of this conversation, we'll see how that goes. I really enjoyed it. I thought these two actors did an amazing job with this scene.
Yeah, the scene was really good. You could tell from the moment she said, I'm not going to help you out, that Debrel was going to be like, oh, I'm still going to ask. And I'm going to make my case, you know.
I think the only thing I don't like about this is I feel like, considering we are now 8 episodes in, I feel like these characters should be a little better developed at this point. But again, I think we can chalk that up to there just simply being too many characters in this show for too few episodes. It doesn't ruin things. It's not a Lovecraft Country problem where there's literally just fucking a whole season's worth of story ideas in one episode. It's just that, I could do with maybe a few more episodes to flesh this stuff out a bit more.
I feel like there are two of the characters who are, their position in the show is maybe to lampshade the ridiculousness of the more, like, kind of broad, outlandish characters. You know?
I think that's a fair call, yeah. Meanwhile, Ethelreda is upstairs, and she's kind of fidgeting with what I'm calling the Twin Peaks Fada Walk With Me ring.
I don't know, I still think that this is Chekhov's ring. I think this has still got something to play, you know?
Yeah, I feel like it has. I mean, we were very wrong in our predictions about Loy Cannon finding it.
Yep. But I still think that before this season is out, that ring's going to be important.
Yeah, it's got to come back in some way. I will say this about Ethelreda. Now, obviously, we've not seen very much of her, as I mentioned earlier. She does seem relatively carefree, considering she shopped a serial killer. She does not seem to be letting that bother her too much.
Yeah, I mean, maybe she's just like, job done, move on.
Yeah, maybe. Lemuel appears. I've written down here, Lemuel does some jazz flirting. Which is my favourite kind of flirting.
I've written down jazz flirting.
There you go. I liked also there was a wee bit of that hint of that old thing where a male music fan is a bit dismissive of a girl's taste in music.
It's like, oh yeah, everyone likes Louis Armstrong.
Everyone likes Louis Armstrong.
Do you even bird, bro?
Right, exactly. Yeah, there was definitely a wee bit of that, but he pulled it back just enough that he was still kind of trying to be ingratiating. There's definitely a wee bit of a spark there, but Debrel appears before it can go any further, says your mother's here, so Lemuel leaves. I did like this line that Debrel says to Ethelreda. It says, he's your captor, not your friend. And it seems that it's more of that kind of hammering home the point about patriarchy, I think, which is one of the many themes that Holly is hammering home again and again here. Anyway, let's get to the second big head-to-head, and that's the one between Defi and Loy Cannon. This was masterclass, I thought. Timothy Oliphant, obviously an amazing actor, and I think Chris Rock did an amazing job facing against him. And considering Chris Rock is not an actor per se, I thought this was pretty great stuff. Before we get into the scene itself, I just want to make a shout out to Opal. Again, we got more of that awkwardness as Defi approaches. I really loved his delivery of "Nope."
I loved his staunch refusal to move right up until he was like, "Fuck, I need to move."
Yeah, he's like, "Fuck, I've got no fucking choice." Yeah, that hit home for me because I'm sure I've been in situations where, obviously not that life or death, but that scenario you're like, I've got no choice but to let the man down here. I'm going to pay for this later. So Defi wants Loy to give up Zelmir and Swanee, basically. And Loy is basically saying, well, I can't do that. I'm accountable for those women. I told them they would go free. We've got some maximum Timothy Oliphant here in this sermon about what Defi sees as the hollowness of a criminal being accountable. We've seen this kind of thing so many times in crime dramas that it really takes not only great dialogue and a great performance to pull it off, but I think what's really clever about the dialogue in this scene is Defi ultimately brings it all down to a level of capitalistic trade, which is something we know Loy definitely understands. You already let go of one of the men responsible for your son's death. So the whole idea that you uphold accountability is now worthless in this marketplace, you know? I thought that was an ingenious bit of logic. And that Defi delivers it all with that same vibe of white supremacist haughtiness that he had with his confrontation with Ethelreda. The tension was there. It was all good stuff. And you know, Opal hanging out in the background just looking hopeless.
Yeah.
All of it was great.
And his tone, what I thought was brilliant was his tone doesn't change between him having a gun and not having a gun.
Yeah.
Like, normally, you know, if someone pulls a gun in that situation, you're going to up the tension and their tone's going to change and, you know, there's going to be more threats. But it's just, the gun's just there almost as if to say, I'm still talking.
The smoothness with which Oliphant did that, it was once again back to the bizarro version of his character from Justified. It was all the same smoothness, but now through this crooked, warped lens of, you know, racism and just general unpleasantness. There's a line here that is worth pointing out, and long-time fans of Fargo would have jumped out their seat as I did when we got to this line. I'm sending you a link here, James. Don't worry about this too much. It's not going to be a spoiler for really much of anything. But I want you to see this. It's just a brief snippet from Season 2 of Fargo. Before you click play on it, I'm just going to say Loy's line about, I like you, and Defi says, we Mormons are a friendly people. And Loy says, no, that's not. You're unfriendly, actually, but it's the way you're unfriendly, like you're doing me a favour.
Yeah.
Now click on that link. For the benefit of the listeners, this is a scene from Season 2 of Fargo with Bokeem Woodbine's character delivering some of his best dialogue out of, you know, an absolute smorgasbord of excellent dialogue that he delivers all the way through that season.
I like you. Met another fellow from Minnesota yesterday. Big guy. Sheriff, I think. I liked him too.
We're very friendly people.
No, that's not it. Pretty unfriendly, actually. But it's the way you're unfriendly. How you're so polite about it. Like you're doing me a favor.
This is the exact same dialogue.
Yeah, it's lifted verbatim. So, you can draw your own conclusions, but you know, James, that I mentioned earlier that long-time fans of the show had spotted a character in this show that they thought was related to a character in Season 2. You can maybe see where it's going there.
Right. Cool.
Alright, so let's get to the big set piece of this episode. Defi goes back with the information of that Zelmir and Swanee are getting the train to Philadelphia. Gets the cops together. He delivers a Sam. Absolutely incredible. I'll just love the sheer incongruity of that whole scene. I want to do a shout out here to Aaron from the Bald Move podcast, because I listened to their coverage of this episode this morning, and he pointed out something that I did not notice. As Deafy is delivering that Sam, just to his left there is a snowman ornament, because of course it's Christmas and there's a bunch of Christmas decorations around, and the snowman ornament's face looks like it has been defaced slightly, so it almost looks like Mr. Snowman. Before the cops head out, Otis Worth receives a phone call. The caller and the intent are not revealed to us, and I guess we'll get to what our speculations are here about what Odyssey's, if you want to interpret instructions, are, or if he went off the rails and followed his own agenda. I guess that's something we will not find out until later episodes, but he does get a call here, hangs up. He gives this great and really convincing speech to Deafy about how his OCD was never taken seriously. He eventually became a cop so he could get a sense of power, but of course that also increased the risk, and so now he's constantly in this back and forth, and the reason he went into the pocket of criminals was, it was always the trade-off between power and risk, and he wants to have a stab at trying to be good again, basically, to try and just be in power and take control.
I bought it. 100%
I fully bought it.
Yeah.
And it seems Deafy bought it. Even Deafy, the most sceptical character on this show to this point, bought it. And I think that was probably a signpost to the viewers as well, that we were meant to buy it. And god damn it, we should have been suspicious. So this whole leading up to the shootout in the train station with Otis psyching himself up.
I thought he was psyching himself up to try and take on the risk again that he was trying to avoid.
He had a whole other thing going the whole time.
The little sort of rhyme that Deafy says before he goes in.
About
the pelican. Was amazing. It's just the way he says it, like it's super meaningful, and it just says Geronimo. It just runs in.
That felt like a pure David Lynch touch, I have to say. Yeah, that was quality stuff. I am gutted we've no longer got Oliphant after this episode, but my god, he went out with some great stuff.
Yeah, I guess he had other shooting commitments with The Mandalorian.
Yeah, that's right.
I've not seen
doesn't he also play up to archetype in that show as well?
I've not seen any of the new season of The Mandalorian yet, but I keep forgetting I've got Disney Plus, so I should watch it at some point.
I heard or gathered through social media that he was playing once again. He seems to be quite happy riding the typecast wave at the moment, and fair play to him.
The music, like where all the cops are kind of slowly going in, looking for Zelmir and Swanee, I thought was very, very Legion. It's the first time that there's been like music in this season that harkens back to that kind of Legion synthesized kind of build up thing. But maybe that's just my music brain.
Yeah, no, I see where you're coming from with that. The other thing about this scene I think we have to mention, did this remind you of a movie at all? Wouldn't be The Untouchables, would it?
That was one of the things, yeah. The other thing it reminded me of was, funnily enough, keeping on brand for this episode of F Sobriety, it really reminded me of Season 4, Episode 1 of Mr. Robot.
Oh, yeah. That's good. Yeah, I like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. Yeah, no, The Untouchables was definitely a touchstone here, and it should remind people of The Untouchables, because this is actually the exact same location in which that scene in The Untouchables was shot. This is actually...
It's the baby carriage stairs.
Yes, this is Union Station in Chicago. This entire season was shot in and around Chicago. And this is the second time I'm making an Untouchables reference in our coverage of this season, because I do remember saying it was kind of a farcical Untouchables situation with the tension building when Don Fada gets shot in episode 1.
Yep.
So Zelmir and Swanee are kind of faffing around in the train station. Swanee robs the stall for sweeties. I did notice there's a train coming in from Sioux Falls with the number 666. Incidentally, Sioux Falls is an important location in season 2 of Fargo, so I do feel that was a deliberate Hollyism. Swanee muses, I'm liable to miss this place. I love it. Again, really sad we're no longer getting this chemistry between these two characters, because I love this. Anytime these two characters together just lounging around, being all louche, I'm 100% here for it. The building of tension in this scene was off the chain. I really thought this was great. The pacing was just perfect. Like the back and forth between showing where Deafy was, what he was looking at, showing where Zelmir and Swanee were. I just thought the tension was perfect. And when Swanee looks over and sees Snowman, Man. I noted here that Zelmir, while she doesn't appear to see Snowman, she senses him. She senses that Swanee has seen him. This deepens the mystery of Snowman for me. Is he a universal phenomenon, or is he, as we've discussed before, linked in some way to the supposed Smutney family curse, or Roulette family curse, I guess we should say? Swanee said it's not houses that are haunted, it's people, so maybe they can pass it on to other people, and that's why Swanee can see him. So Zelmir and Swanee, they have a passionate kiss, and then they draw their guns, and it was at that point I was like, okay, at least one of them is dead. At least one of them is not making it out of this. Now, what follows, by the way, Fargo has a previous track record of this, of a major action scene that you don't actually see happen, that it all takes place off screen. And in this case, it was particularly effective, because when we do see it, fuck man, all those bodies, that was genuinely horrifying.
Massacre. I expected to see a bunch of dead cops when he runs in, but I did not expect to see like all the commuters and shit just lying in pools of blood.
Yeah, that did shock me. You know, obviously, Zelmir's using a machine gun. There's a limit to how accurate you can be in a situation like that, so I guess it's realistic. But fucking hell, there were so many bodies.
Yep.
It was absolutely hideous. All in all, this was a great subversion of the action scene that we commonly think we want in this situation. Because when Otis comes in here and he sees all this carnage, we immediately forget about the action scene we thought we were going to get, and we're suddenly faced with this, the real human cost, the real atrocity that is taking place here. I actually found that quite powerful. As much as a show like Fargo is full of a lot of hokey and a lot of kind of ironic touches, it's moments like this that can actually be really quite devastating.
Yeah.
So Otis Weth eventually finds Deafy's cornered the two, Zelmir and Swanee, only because they finally run out of bullets.
The casualness. Deafy's like, well, I've got them.
They finally ran out of bullets.
But that means they killed literally every other cop that he was there with.
Every single cop is dead. Yeah, again, that's the way the show kind of balances this kind of cartoonish absurdity with sort of real world kind of weight. Yeah, it was great stuff. Deafy asks Otis to cuff them. We get that moment of pause. And at this point, I'm still thinking, oh, Otis is still having a flake out here. And then he just turns his gun on Deafy, and then he turns his gun on Swanee, and I'm like... Felt like a pure idiot for not seeing it coming.
But then he fucks it. I was genuinely surprised Zelmir made it out. I thought it was just going to be like a three-for.
I did as well. The fact that she also sees the snowman behind Otis after Swanee has been shot, I was like, oh, I guess Zelmir's going to die as well.
Yeah.
But no, she managed to charge past. So she's going to survive at least a bit longer. She may still die before the end of the season. Yeah, this was a hell of a scene, man. And I absolutely love the sign-off of this scene. Deafy's death stare. Just the pure accusatory look.
Yep.
That was brilliant. That was great use of Timothy Oliphant's face.
I had to pause at that point and be like, before I watched any further of the episode.
Yeah, it was genuinely breathtaking stuff. I did have to kind of sit and take stock. One of the things, it really complicates the morality of the show at this point. It's really letting us know there are no good guys in this story, and that we should have believed Deafy's story when he told us just how cold-blooded Zelmir and Swanee were. This is essentially the story of people competing to be Americans. That's a theme we've mentioned before. That's a zero-sum game, and essentially each one of these people, in their quest to become American, are sort of losing their humanity. And I really thought this scene conveyed that quite powerfully. A quick note on Snowman's appearance. This is the most we've seen of him, and we've got a bit more sense of his costume. Definitely not in the 20th century, I would say.
No, it looked like a sort of... He was rocking in some old-timey gear.
Yeah, the silver buttons and all that kind of thing. There's an implied story there, if not a story that we'll actually have conveyed to us at some point. Alright, so let's just talk the denouement. Back at the Fada place, Gaetano is making Josto drink Irish whiskey, special juice. We're all about the special juice.
Hashtag special juice.
This episode. Hashtag special juice. Now, here's where I thought Holly's writing was laying it on with a quadruple-sized trowel here, where the Fada mom pops out and gives what I call the Uncle Ben speech, where it's like, my sons, I love my sons, oh please come in out of the cold, and all this kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, we've not seen anything this close to a wholesome family moment with these characters till this point. She is about to fucking die. She has just signed her own immediate, imminent death warrant with these words. I saw it coming a mile off.
Yep.
And sure enough, in come the Fargo gang, led by Mort Kellerman himself. And Mort Kellerman, just to mention again, this actor, he did appear in Season 2. You know that Season 2 is set in the late 70s, so it's no spoiler to say it's a flashback we see him in Season 2. Yeah, so it's kind of fun for long-term Fargo fans to see this guy. It's just a fun Easter egg. But I have to admit, I did not expect him himself to show up and actually do the deed. And considering I was predicting that Mort Kellerman might not come through on the deal with Lloyd Cannon, I'm going to say Woodstradamus, not today. So Josto takes the cowardly option of hiding behind the logs. I say cowardly, some people might just say fucking sensible. Gaetano goes full Butch Cassidy, both 6 guns blazing, although often with these kind of scenes I'm like, how many bullets does he actually have in those revolvers? He's done a fair amount of trigger pulling here.
That's why I had down that he went the full chow on fat, man. John Woo cares not for how many bullets a gun has. And neither was Gaetano at that point.
The Kellerman gang absolutely wipe out everybody else in that back garden except Gaetano for some reason, and they are all scared off shitless at the sight of Gaetano, who has suddenly reclaimed his badassery. Yeah, I've said all I'm going to say about that, but it's still not entirely working for me. So we get the scream from inside the house, and of course I'm sitting here going, yeah, okay, just show us the mum's dead body already.
Uncle Ben is dead.
Peter with great power, Josto. Was the other woman their sister? Was it their sister?
It was, yeah.
Okay, so that's their mum and sister, both wiped out. So, yeah, it's all tits up round at the Fada house, and I know we left off our last commentary on this show saying, I guess we're well into the war now. I guess we're well into... this will be the point at which, if it was George W. Bush leading the war, he'd claim mission accomplished.
Yeah, that is, in terms of body counts, that show, that episode, I think, had one of the highest body counts of any episode of television I've seen for a long time.
Yeah.
A lot of people fucking died in that episode.
Press F for Deafy, press F for Swanee, and just keep your finger pressed down on the F key for all those people in the train station. I can't believe the way... I mean, it was a cool scene to shoot up in the back garden. I don't understand why the Kellerman gang just suddenly dropped a bollock when Gaetano became Chow Yun Fat. I'm a bit confused about that.
I can't believe I missed this trick. He became Chow Yun Fat.
Hey! That is worthy of a candle after. Yeah, Lloyd Cannon, he should not have trusted Mort Kellerman to handle this situation. I feel like he's just made things worse. What he needed to do was send in Azealia Banks. Alright, so that wraps up for that episode. I am scoring Fargo Season 4, Episode 8. I'm scoring that one 7.5 5s out of 9. How about you?
I would go for a 7.5 as well.
There you go. We are absolutely in simpatico on the Fargos.
We are in sync right now.
Bagsy Justin.
Everyone wants to be Justin. I'm excited to see where this goes in the final 3 episodes.
Yeah, same. I feel things are going to ratchet up. We're going to get some pretty fast-paced final 3 episodes. Before we wrap up on this, I just want to make mention of the podcast I have been listening to in the last week. Just been catching up with the coverage of Season 4, called Fargo Talks Fargo. They do some great obsessive coverage on this show, like really talking about fine details and the production design. There are very few podcasts out there that even podcast about this show. So to find 2 podcasters who are just finding the minute details and talking about how there are patterns of circles in the production design and how there are patterns of 2s and 3s and all this kind of stuff. If you're right into that kind of geeky level of analysis of a show, it's a really fun podcast to listen to. One of the things they've got going with it, though, which I was not immediately digging, but they've kind of won me over with it. They have a theory that the whole thing is a Wizard of Oz analogy. And they were speculating in early episodes that Thurman, God bless him, bring him back, was an avatar for the Scarecrow because he seemed not to have a brain. And he said that Otis Weff was the lion because he's looking for courage. So that kind of tracks. Otis Weff did find his courage in this episode, I would argue. They eventually won me over it a wee bit because they're just so obsessive with it. But here's a fun note. I watched, and I don't normally watch them, but I watched the teaser for next week's episode of Fargo.
Right.
Do you want to hear it?
Go on.
The entire teaser is in black and white, set in Kansas, apparently catching up with Rabbi and Satchel, and there is a tornado. And I'm like, well, Fargo talks Fargo, hats off.
Man.
It looks like Noah Hawley is going full in. Like, this is going to be this season's version of the Big Bad Wolf episode of Legion. In fact, I'm hoping the Zooks turns up. That's Jason Mantzoukas to those of you who are not au fait with my nickname for Jason Mantzoukas.
If he turns up as the wizard.
That would be absolutely phenomenal.
Just doing the wolf again. If we're just doing any Jason Mantzoukas fucking performance, actually.
Yeah, and another fully on-brand Zooks performance I would be 100% here for. But yeah, it looks like we're getting a full-on Wizard of Oz analogy next episode.
So let me just run that back again. So who's the Scarecrow?
Thurman, because he apparently had no brain.
So Thurman's the Scarecrow. Otis is the Lion.
Yep.
Who's the Tin Man?
I forget who the Tin Man is.
And I'm assuming that Ethelreda is Dorothy.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, right. We'll see how this goes with the Kansas episode.
We'll see how it tracks. But yeah, my hat was off to them as soon as I saw the teaser. I was like, alright, okay guys. Alright, and that wraps it up for Fargo coverage for this episode. I think it's time to hit the bar, James.
I think so. My round?
Think so.
Good wee bar break there.
Yep, we've refilled our special juice.
What kind of special juice are you drinking this evening,
My
Craig?
special juice this evening, James, is Luis Felipe Edwards Cabernet Sauvignon from Chile. It is absolutely stunning, to be quite honest.
Much like every other episode where one of us is drinking wine, the other is drinking beer. I'm drinking beer this evening.
That? We're not allowed to cross the streams.
No. My beer of choice this evening is Brewdog's Aldi IPA.
Oh, you know what that means? You're literally punk as fuck. You're like the Amanda Palmer of beer drinkers. That's how punk you are.
I don't know if you've seen the Aldi have their own brand version of punk IPA called Anti-Establishment IPA.
Seriously?
Which I thought was a brilliant.
That is stunning.
A brilliant swipe. However, they also have a Brewdog official Aldi IPA called Ald IPA.
No way.
brewed by Brewdog for Aldi, and the can is basically in all the colours of an Aldi sign. I'll need to send you a picture of the can as I've got it
this
here.
This is one of those moments where I have to pull out my stock phrase of what stage of capitalism is this?
Surprisingly decent. I do prefer their own piss take anti-establishment IPA though over their Brewdog one. Now that we have our drinks refreshed, let's talk about
Misty Roberts, Season 1, Episode 2, Ones and Zeros. With apologies to Matt Quayle.
Yeah, but we can't afford the rights to play the actual theme tune as we've mentioned before. So every time we do one of these, we're just going to acapella that shit.
It's the amateur flying pickets or nothing.
And it's going to get progressively worse each time. So, Episode 1.
No, Episode 2.
No, sorry, Episode 2. The full title of which is Episode 1.1_1-and-zeros.mpeg.
Oh, okay.
If
you want to get technical, okay.
The following review contains spoilers for the complete series of Mr. Robot. It also contains discussions about mental health issues and sexual abuse, which some listeners may find disturbing. Please listen at your own discretion.
Written and directed by Sam Esmail, which is a double credit we are going to get used to seeing a lot more often, particularly from Season 2 onwards.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so preliminary thoughts, James, on this episode. Do you have any?
Well, it's been a while since I've watched this episode, and I was reminded upon watching it that it's essentially television perfection.
Yeah, it pretty much is.
Like, on the second episode of the show, Esmail's storytelling, mise-en-scène,
character
performances, Yeah, the characters that are introduced in this
The
episode.
look and feel of the show is, I know we mentioned it when we were talking about the first episode, just how much the language is introduced in that pilot, but it's really, really solidified in this second episode.
Two little asides, given our previous chat about episode 1, Hello Friend.
Mm-hmm.
We were debating in episode 2 of our podcast what the CD was that he had burned. We both thought maybe it was Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here, but we weren't sure. And I did double check, and we were correct.
Who was that again in the digital cemetery?
That was from Krista's boyfriend.
Oh yeah, quote unquote Michael.
Yep, quote unquote Michael was burned as Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here,
you
like
go.
we thought of. The title of episode 1, and in fact like the ongoing phrase used in Mr. Robot of Hello Friend, I recently found out has more meaning than I thought it did. It's a very popular phrase among hackers. Hello Friend is actually a reference to the 2006 email scam /virus/worm called Gurong, which, if you got it in your inbox, had the subject heading Hello Friend, and if you opened it, it would then email everyone in your contacts with Hello Friend from you, and that's how it spread. Since then, it became a common phrase among hackers because of its popularity and because of how effective it was as a virus.
Wow, okay, yeah, that's news to me. I vaguely remember that virus being around. Good note. Another thing I'd say about this episode, when I rewatched it this week, just in isolation, I think I've only ever binged the first season prior, and it's not until we've started doing this rewatch for the purpose of the podcast that I'm looking at these episodes individually, and man, it really brought home to me, there is a lot of information conveyed in this episode, by the way.
Yeah.
For as much as Sam Esmail says he hates plot, he crams a lot of plot points into this episode.
Yeah, Sam may be like, fuck plot, but you know what, Sam? Also love plot.
He definitely does a lot of the work in this episode, so I guess after this he's like, alright, fuck plot from this point. I've done the plot, that's it, we're done. Dunzo, Washington.
You know what Sam does like, though? Is a dramatic bait and switch.
He certainly does.
As depicted by the opening scene of this episode.
So let's get into it. So the opening scene, we are in this boardroom that we were left in at the end of the pilot, where Tyrell has greeted Elliot with the old bonsoir, Elliot. And a fun thing here, we thought he was going to be surrounded by eco-executives, I think, the first time we ever see that.
The top 1% of the top 1% all meeting in that room.
Yeah, and it turns out, in fact, to be, as Tyrell puts it, 11 of our most annoying lawyers.
I love that line.
Now, something that I have always noticed about this, because obviously there's a bit of time passed between the filming of the pilot and the filming of this episode, there are some differences here. Tyrell's hair is different. Mm-hmm. It's a wee bit longer and it's not as styled. And I sort of wondered, because obviously they do pay attention to continuity, so I wonder if Sam Esmail decided he wanted to alter Tyrell's appearance a wee bit. He does look distinctly less American Psycho here, and I wonder if he thought that having the jailed hair and whatnot was a bit too on the nose.
I think you might be right, because there does seem like a definite attempt to almost humanise Tyrell, or at least humanise his look, compared to like that sort of Wall Street yuppie caricature that he kind of represented in the pilot.
Yeah, I get that sense here when I'm rewatching it now. But Tyrell has some great stuff here. He gives the whole give a man a gun, he can rob a bank. Give a man a bank, he can rob the world line. He says, silly phrase, but he likes it, because to him it essentially means power belongs to the people that take it.
And this is the first of many people in this episode who tell Elliot what power is, which I really loved about this. I hadn't picked up on it before, but when I was really analysing it, like you say, on its own, it seems that everyone around Elliot, particularly his adversaries, or at least adversaries at this point, are trying to tell him what power is, like he doesn't know.
Although I made the note in my notes here, it's also bookended a wee bit by the scene with Krista near the end of the episode, because she tells him that he has power, which is kind of flipping around in some ways. Certainly what Vera says to him midway through the episode. But the other thing about Tyrell's speech here is it's also kind of hinting at the point that meritocracy is therefore a myth, and Tyrell knows that it's a myth, and he's fine with it being a myth. He's fine with success being equal to thievery. And Tyrell, I've written here, Tyrell is basically the honest face of capitalism. He's someone who knows that the world he lives in is essentially an immoral one, and he's totally fine with it. He comes straight out and he offers Elliot head of cybersecurity, tells him he'll be a multi-millionaire within 5 years. That's head of cybersecurity within eCorp. And I love Elliot's delivery of, can I think about it?
Yeah, because Tyrell's face is like, does not compute.
His reaction, though, is pretty superb. He just turns to the lawyer, says, I need the room.
Yeah.
And the lawyers reluctantly leave. And it's the dirty looks from some of the lawyers as they're passing Elliot. It's like, what the fuck is this wee naff all about? Tyrell is currently acting as interim CTO since Terry Colby is, shall we say, indisposed. Tyrell says, I should track down the hackers and thank them. Because it's put him on track, basically. I think because certainly the first time I ever watched this show, and even on repeat viewings because I'm thinking about other things, I'm not really thinking so much about the nuances of what Tyrell is saying here. But it's pretty clear, I think, that he at least suspects Elliot has some other involvement with all of this other than just figuring out Terry Colby was responsible, even though at this point it's not revealed to Tyrell that Terry Colby wasn't actually responsible. And the reason... This is the first hint we get. I mean, this is really the first scene, but it makes clear to us that Tyrell has recognised something brilliant in Elliot.
Yeah.
And he is so impressed with it that, to him, this is the closest he's seen to an equal. Tyrell is someone who clearly thinks highly of himself, and he's found in Elliot someone he almost feels he can think as highly about. And it's interesting looking at this from the perspective of where we know this show goes, that over the course of the show, Tyrell seems to come to think a little less of himself, but never comes to think less of Elliot.
He says when he offers Elliot the job, not the first time, but when he asks for the room from the lawyers, he says he tells Elliot that they're going to basically let Allsafe go. And he says,
Allsafe will be cut loose.
Yeah, he says, I want you here with me. He doesn't say, like, here with us.
Right, yeah, exactly. Here with me. He's already got it in his mind that the two of them should be a team, that there's something actually quite kind of romantic about this, if not in a sexual sense, in the actual other dictionary meaning of the word, that there's some kind of kismet at work between these two characters. Then we know that later in the show he goes on to use very, very lofty terms like we should have been gods together. So he is developing an obsession here.
And he's not the only one. Don't mean to jump ahead in this episode, but he's not the only one of Elliot's adversaries who also in this episode immediately developed that.
Yeah, we get to know that Elliot seems to have this kind of effect on very obsessive men. So yeah, eCorp are going to take everything in-house, so that would be effectively would be the end of Allsafe. But nonetheless, Elliot says, I think I'm happy where I am. And the irony in all of the meanings of that statement is it's some nice dialogue there. And at the close of that scene, Tyrell just kind of turns away, kind of deflated, looks out the window, and he just says in the gentlest way, well, I thought I'd ask.
Yeah. While Beethoven's Symphony No. 7 in A major plays.
Allegretto. Yeah, that's brilliant, man.
Have you ever seen the trailer someone made for The Shining, where they recut it like as a family comedy?
No.
Someone sort of recut and re-soundtracked the Shining trailer, and it genuinely sounded like a family film, like a comedy. And in a way, you could do that with this scene as well. Just make this like a
Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, The Shining.
It's not even that. It's just called Shining. But I'll need to send you it because it's fucking amazing. Yeah, you could do that with a scene and recut it as like a romantic comedy without changing much.
Yeah, that is a good call. Worth noting here, we get this is a really iconic shot of Manhattan through this window, and we're so used to seeing that cityscape, and particularly with such a recognisable piece of music as the Symphony No. 7 Allegretto. I love the fact that this is like classic cinematic language, but it is entirely undercut by the fact that Elliot has essentially just knocked Tyrell back. Yeah. And he's like, well, I thought I'd ask. It's like the most deflated ending to that possible scene. And we get the title card, beautiful title card. They all are. A note I've made here that I do quite enjoy is the music actually continues on the car radio.
Yeah.
When we see Elliot back in the car with Mr. Sutherland, or Mr. X as he introduces himself here. Before we move on to that though, I think we need to make mention of the fact that this room, because we do see it again in season 4.
Yep.
It's an interesting choice, this. Why did Sam Esmail choose to bring this room back? I can see why aesthetically it works. Like, this is where some internal power plays play out, so it makes sense for all of Elliot's personalities to get together and be their own internal boardroom of Elliot's psyche. It certainly has that value. I think it's also the first place in the story that Elliot has some idea of just how far-reaching his own abilities might take him. And it becomes, bear in mind the whole vigilante superhero storyline, that the mastermind is sort of writing for itself. Imagery like that skyline is fundamental to those kinds of stories. Mm-hmm. And this might be the first time he's seen the cityscape from this particular kind of vantage point, and so he's just imprinted it in his psyche that this is where the dramatic confrontations should take place.
Yeah, this is the Kingpin's lair.
Right, exactly. It's got heavy Kingpin vibes about it, that room, actually, yeah.
A quick note about Mr. Sutherland.
Yep.
When he's like, you can call me Mr. X, and he's like, what, have you not seen JFK? That's embarrassing. And he's like, call me Mr. Sutherland, and I just love that his surname's Sutherland, and he's banging on about JFK, having just claimed to be someone else. That was, oh man, that's chef kiss.
Do yourself a favour and watch it. Oliver Stone, come on, and pay for it.
Yeah. Is that Sam Esmail talking to the audience at that point?
Quite possibly. He gives him Tyrell's number, says we're always around, and of course this feeds into Elliot's paranoia that follows for the next few episodes about the Men in Black.
Yep.
And one of many Sam Esmail's bait and switches, because we from then on are starting to think, are the Men in Black real, and are they part of whatever Tyrell is doing? So it's some nice stuff. He gets back to his apartment. Outside we see Sheila with first appearance of Fernando Vera.
It's your boy.
Vera is getting a bit handsy with Sheila. He eventually buggers off. We just get the very sinister look from Vera. He eventually backs off. Elliot needs to re-up. He tells Sheila he needs a special juice. Sheila tells him she has none of the withdrawal meds, and she makes him promise he won't just go nuts on the pure morphine without it.
Yeah, I love that she's refusing to deal him any more morphine because he made her promise not to. But then her promise to him falls apart pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, we cue right to, in his apartment, a massive almighty snort.
Yep.
He proceeds to hack Tyrell. He sees that everything about Tyrell is obvious. No two-step verification or anything. Everything seems happy and perfect.
We get our first glimpse of Joanna Wellick.
A queen, beautiful and terrible as the dawn, treacherous as the sea.
Technical first appearance of Joanna in photo form. She's back in photo form. Elliot wonders, did he let me hack him?
Or was it bad noob practice?
Yeah, a wee bit of both.
It's just the phrase "bad noob practice" is amazing.
We then get first ever wipe down. Yo, take a drink for wipe down. Yep. I must admit, I love these sequences.
Yeah.
Every time we see that, I'm like, yes. There's just something so satisfying about watching Elliot stick a drill right through a hard drive. By the way, I'm not sure about the efficacy of that in real life.
I'm not sure either, but I'm assuming, because all the coding in Mr. Robot is legit. There was a podcast when Mr. Robot was actually first airing where it was hackers watching it and basically talking about the reality of what they were doing. And the upshot of that was, yes, everything that they're doing is real. That would work. That's all true coding. So I'm assuming that the wipe down has got to be accurate as well, you know?
All right, fair enough. I listen, I'm always willing to take Sam Esmail's word for it. I know he definitely knows his shit when it comes to this techie shit. So, yeah, but I just something about putting a drill through a hard drive. I think because it's so satisfying to watch. And I'm often disappointed when I see things on screen and then realise the real life equivalent is nothing like that. When he's putting the drill back, this is where we get the first ever glimpse of this photo. Mm-hmm. And at the moment, it's a photo of Elliot with his mum on the beach. This photo will transform over time. It will do a Back to the Future, but in reverse. It will do a Missy Elliott, flip it and reverse it. Elliot says, I'm breaking my rule, but it's an off week.
This classic addict shit he's doing.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the way Vera calls him out for exactly that later in the episode. I've written here, Eraserhead Radiator.
Yep.
This Radiator always gives me Eraserhead vibes, and he's really going to town on it in this episode. And even the sound design is a wee bit Eraserheady. Since I'm mentioning this again, we're back to the geography of Elliot's apartment. I did take note this time. There are exactly 3 windows in Elliot's apartment besides the bathroom.
I noted that as well because we did talk about, does he only have one window other than his bathroom in the apartment? And every time we saw another one, it was like, he does have a little more natural light.
Yeah, there's a narrow one by the kitchenette. There's another narrow one just to the side of that, and then there's a broad one where his computer is. Yep. Yeah, so he has more than Henry Spencer from said Eraserhead. I still like the idea though that the paucity of windows is to do with him rebelling against Microsoft. So we get some walks with Flipper. Flipper does some toilet on Elliot's bed. So takes Flipper out. I do like the dialogue here. You got to deuce it out there, homie.
Yeah, so you got this.
Yeah, he uses the "you got this," which, as we discussed in the previous episode, is Elliot's mantra to encourage himself. Mm-hmm. You got this, you got this, you got this. And there's some internal dialogue and monologue in here from Elliot where he's talking about the mind and the screen now might as well be the same thing. It's just one of many such little nuggets that Elliot likes to make, but I did note that one down. Mm-hmm. Back at Allsafe, Gideon is giving him a raise. He tells him, you basically saved the company by shopping Terry Colby. And at first Elliot protests, and I'm thinking to myself, Elliot, for fuck's sake, just remind us again how much rent you're paying for that shitty apartment with the Eraserhead radiator.
To quote Gideon himself, take the raise.
Yeah, take the raise and shut the fuck up, Elliot. So Gideon does express a wee bit of suspicion about the data file, like why Elliot didn't reveal it straight away. And Elliot kind of said, I didn't know what I had at first, I wanted to make sure. And Gideon's kind of like, well, you're usually pretty certain. And Elliot says, maybe you don't know me that well, which, you know, again, the script in this show is littered with these kind of lines from Elliot that you can now read back and go, yeah, you don't know which one of me you're talking to right now. Gideon mentions F Society. Elliot freaks out because clearly he's not been paying attention to what's been happening in the news with all the fuckery with Terrell and whatnot. So F Society, we've got the first ever F Society video with the first ever appearance of the Mask. So there's a whole lot of firsts in this episode.
Yeah.
And F Society are claiming that they have a bunch of emails and files from the eCore servers, private emails from the executives and whatnot, and they're threatening to dump the lot unless Terry Colby is released. This video, I love this. And every time I see these videos, they're just a thrill to watch. Some of the dialogue, I just love how hyperbolic it is. It's pure comic booky. Mm-hmm. It's like every tentacle of your monstrosity will be sliced off at the nerve. You must release people from your prison of debt. The people no longer accept your economic slavery. And I'm not going to lie, you know, as a socialist, hearing all these anti-capitalist sentiments, it sets me on fire every time, and it makes me realise, I was Sam Esmail's patsy all along, because I was missing all the other things that were going on underneath that rhetoric. Yeah. You know, that only now I can go back and say, oh, fuck yeah, there was so much going on in this scene. I love the fact that Christian Slater's voice on that video becomes distinctly more Slater-esque towards the end, and when he utters the words, "We will kill you," it's full-on Slater. And Elliot immediately says, "Play again."
And the audience says, "Play it again." Goes back and watches it again. That video is a masterpiece because the way it's edited, the actual video that he's watching is simultaneously amazing, but also there are bits of it where you're like, it is so hyperbolic and kind of cheesy at points.
Whenever I think about the comic book lines as well, whenever I see that, I'm always thinking of course, the giant space squid from Watchmen.
Sorry, people who watched the film but didn't read the comic book.
Yeah, Alan Moore hates you. I mean, to be fair, this just in, Alan Moore hates everyone.
Sorry, human race. Alan Moore hates you. We get some peak Ollie outside.
Yeah, take a drink. First appearance of Cisco. I fucking love Cisco.
Cisco's great.
There are so many great supporting characters in this show, but he is one of my favourite ones.
He takes more of a journey of a supporting character, I think, than most, because he starts off being so shady.
That's true.
And then you start to realise he's not that shady. He works for shady people.
He's actually really good at his job because he is playing a role here, and that's what we don't realise when we first see this. This fucking annoying asshole white rapper, like trying to flog his CDs.
Have you you've been in New York, right? We talked about this before.
Yes, yeah.
Did anyone try and sell you a rap CD in the street?
Not a rap CD, but things analogous.
3 times people try to sell me their mixtapes in the street.
Yeah, no, I definitely have.
So it's not like an outlandish, like, why are they thinking someone's trying to... Just in case anyone's like, what? It's a thing that happens.
Oh, no, it definitely
people hustle,
happens,
they try and sell you their shit.
It's not even just rappers. I mean, I definitely... I remember seeing a bunch of white guys as well just trying to sell me, oh, my band did this demo. It's a lot of that kind of thing. New York is one of those cities that is just a kind of hub for the industry, though, that I guess you can kind of get. I guess the hope is you'll accidentally pass it to someone in the industry. I guess historically that's how all that shit started.
Yep.
But yeah.
But his performance as like the sort of annoying asshole white rapper is just fucking pitch perfect.
Yeah, and it seems so part of the scenery that certainly the first time I watched this, I did not suspect there was anything untoward with this guy in the street. It just seemed like this is just some background detail.
Yeah.
It's some brilliantly pitched stuff by the show.
But skipping ahead past Ollie's Groupon offer.
Yeah, I was just coming back to we get peak Ollie here. Fucking Groupon offer. I really enjoy the way the script just piles on the Olliness of Ollie. You know, it's a flimsy container, but that container never seems to burst.
No, it's like, okay, I'll take your CD. I've got 48 followers.
48 followers, there's some tastemakers in there. It's the back and forth as well between him and Cisco, because Cisco's like, oh, your girl will love this, man. It's lyrical, poetic. It's like the 2 worst guys ever on this street corner. So Elliot turns up briefly, and Ollie proposes a double date, because apparently Angela has let slip about Shayla. Elliot uncharacteristically just agrees, but it's because he spied some men in black across the street. I love this line, by the way. I have to go, neighbours complain about the dog barking. Because man with not all his dogs barking, of course, is an old adage about someone who's not mentally all there.
Yep.
It also always reminds me of that line in Lost Highway where Bill Pullman keeps hearing the dog bark in the morning. He's like, who the hell owns that dog?
Plus, a bit of Wild at Heart. We've got Jack Nance talking about how his dog barks some.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Lynch is fond of that metaphor. He has used it a few times. Alright, so Elliot feels he needs to lie low. There's too much shit going on. So he retreats to his apartment. And this is where we get the immortal Darlene in the shower scene. I say immortal because this is immortal amongst the fans, because if you've read many interviews with Sam Esmail about how he first came up with the idea for Mr. Robot, it did originally start life as an idea for a motion picture script, feature film. And it's when he got to this scene, apparently, that he was something like 160 pages in, and he went, oh, yeah, this isn't going to work.
Part of me would love to see what the Mr. Robot movie would have been. How the fuck do you turn this 4 seasons of TV into a movie?
Who the hell knows, man?
But yeah, so this is
only in the mind of Esmail did this ever make sense.
This is the start of, for me, upon rewatch, I noted this. I think this is the 3rd time I've watched episode 2. I've done 2 complete watches, so this is the 3rd one, where it's stunningly obvious that she is his sister.
Her entire demeanour is pure sisterly bants right from the start. Yeah. But because the writing is particularly ingenious here, because we are seeing it so much from Elliot's perspective, that when you see someone engage in what is basically sibling banter, but you don't have the context of them being a sibling, they do sound like an absolute maniac.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm stealing your clothes. My dress had cum stains on it. Just kidding. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
My favourite line of this whole bit is the way she delivers the line, your dog shot on your bed.
Shot on your bed, yeah. You gotta walk that thing.
Shot. I was done for about 5 minutes.
It's peak Darlene.
Yeah.
So Darlene persuades him to come with her to Coney Island. There's an important F Society meeting afoot. And I think Elliot is just keen to get Darlene the fuck out of his flat. So leaves Flipper with Shayla. He says, I think she needs a walk or something. And Shayla's like, oh, of course she needs a walk. She's a dog. We're back to take a drink for people paranoid on trains. Elliot is pure shitting his brakes as he's looking about, expecting men in black to appear hither and thither. Darlene, meanwhile, is in full Darlene flow.
Talking about, unless I'm very much mistaken, Cisco.
Yeah, Cisco having proposed to her, although this is one of the beautiful things about the rewatch. We now know that Cisco, whereas at the time we had no context for any of this. Poor Cisco.
Oh, man.
Pour one out for Cisco. And if she's yammering away, that's where we get the line that Elliot says, "This chick is out of her mind, batshit crazy." And at the moment that my note was, at the moment that he says that, it's exactly when she's getting to personal details that might give us clues. And I like that her voice is audible enough for us to know she's still talking, but we cannot hear a word she's saying.
I love it cuts back in. She's just like, "I wanted a turtle."
Yeah, I wanted a turtle.
Because it goes
Fucking
back,
amazing.
it goes away from like the personal stuff and goes back to the, you can maybe think this girl's a bit mental, you know?
Yeah, totally. Well, again, it's one of those things like if you're catching up with your sibling, this is just, you just talk about mad shit. But if this is someone you've only met once, particularly under the already very bizarre circumstances of F Society, of course you're going to think, okay, this woman is genuinely insane.
And then, sorry, I totally skipped over the earlier where he's like, "How do you know where I live?" And she's just like, "Why wouldn't I know where you live?"
Why wouldn't I know? Yeah. And I think at the time we take that to mean, oh, she's obviously hacked him somehow, looked it up.
Yeah,
you know,
she's probably picked the lock to get into his flat and
Yeah,
stuff, you know? Like,
Darlene's clearly a shady character, a bit of a grifter. And the thing is, she is, so all of that makes perfect sense. Elliot sees the men in black, and Darlene kind of drags him into the other carriage, and he's like, does she see them too? But of course, this is just Darlene being peak Darlene at this point. She's just been very kind of frivolous. I will say, though, this is the most happy-go-lucky we ever see Darlene, because this is before shit gets real in this show.
yeah.
We never see her quite this carefree again. She becomes a very different character, like from season 2 onwards. So it is interesting watching her character from that perspective in this episode. The other thing I do notice about this, Darlene, as we've said, never stops talking. And obviously a lot of it is because Ellie is so silent and she feels she has to fill the silence. But a lot of it, I think, is forced banter to make up for the gaps in their relationship as well. And we know from what Darlene says towards the end of the show that she feels so guilty that she did not remain constant contact with Elliot, that she should have reached out to him. And watching this again, this part of me feels really sad for Darlene here, because like she's clearly trying her best, and Elliot, of course, is just on another planet. You know, she's not even talking to the Elliot she thinks she's talking to. It adds a real element of pathos to the scene in retrospect.
And she knows, that's the real sad thing.
That's true. She does suspect. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Oh, man. Sorry.
So eventually they get to Coney Island. Darlene eventually, she's trying. This is the other thing I note here. She's clearly covering up that she's hurt that Elliot won't let her stay with him. And so she just immediately says, "Oh, fine, I'll crash at Mobley's. I don't like dogs anyway," kind of thing. Think, oh, poor Darlene. So they step into F Society, and then we get that awkward applause.
Yep. And no one looks at Christian Slater.
Yeah, and once again, I'm an idiot for never having noticed this. We get classic awkward Mobley here, trying to shake his hand, then stepping back, going, "Hey, I just want to say, good work, man." Yeah, this guy, that from their perspective, they've all been in a room with for hours on end. But Elliot's just like, "I barely know you guys." And they're all just like, "Okay then." So Mr. Robot lets slip here about Steel Mountain, that being the next thing.
Can we just take a moment here
Yep.
to appreciate, we've said it before, we'll say it again, but how effortlessly cool Christian Slater is every time he's on screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's our Gen X heartthrob, all grown up.
Yeah.
And he is just, every line he says just fucking drips with like cool.
He is ours, and you cannot take him away from us. Yeah, and even here in the context of these early episodes, where, as far as we know, Mr. Robot's a real person and is a fucking psychopath, we start to understand. Because the things he does here and says here, you're like, okay, this guy is mental, but he's definitely got that charisma. I'm going to just mention something Elliot says towards the end of this episode. There is some David Koresh energy in the sense that he is really charismatic, even despite the fact he's clearly a fucking wingnut. So Mobley and Romero check their Steel Mountain data at Mr. Robot's insistence. I did note here that when Mr. Robot turns away, puts his shades on, Darlene almost entirely mirrors his action by turning away and sighing and putting her own shades on. Which is quite a beautiful little moment of mise-en-scène. Elliot pesters Mr. Robot, "Why does Darlene know where I live?" And Mr. Robot gives the diversion, "Let's not talk about her. That'll be like entering a K-hole you'll never wake up from."
Which, again, thematically, fuck. So
Yeah.
clever.
Yeah, it really is. All the double and triple meanings going on here are off the chain. So it reveals us the plan to blow up the gas plant next to Steel Mountain, which is a data storage facility for Ecor. So Mr. Robot talks of all the juicy stuff that they found in the all the special juice that F Society have found in the Ecor executive data.
Incidentally, this episode of F Sobriety is simply titled Special Juice.
Special juice. He says that emails full of racism, sexism, fascism. We're going to ism so much over them they won't be able to see straight. It turns out the F Society video was Trenton's idea, and it helps keep Colby in the spotlight and attention away from the idea that there's, whatever they're up to, basically. Immortal line from Mr. Robot. I know she looks innocent, but she has some Allah Akbar in her. So I don't think that's entirely PC.
But it's fucking funny. And it's the kind of thing you would expect a character like him to come out with,
Anyway, Elliot says Terrell Wellick knows that something is up, and that he suspects Elliot might be involved. I love how Mr. Robot describes Terrell as a corporate robot without any trace of irony. Mr. Robot wants Elliot to use his all-safe security clearance to hack into, I guess, the climate control system and help ignite the gas plant. Elliot's saying you can't blow up a gas pipeline, and that's when Mr. Robot starts giving it, this is war, people die, the world is dangerous not because of people doing bad, but because of the people who do nothing. Darlene's worm that she's made will kick into the data center, a worm that Elliot helped install. Meanwhile, Ecor's backup in China is going to be disabled by the Dark Army.
Yeah, I've made a note. This is the first mention we get of the Dark Army. And
hashtag first mention Dark Army.
And Elliot / the Mastermind's reaction is like, what?
Yeah, they are like my enemies, man. They have no code. Mr. Robot's line here, they hate US capitalism as much as anyone. I've always loved that line.
Yeah.
But Elliot is given, I'm not killing anyone. And this is where we get the immortal.
Tell me one thing, Elliot. Are you a 1 or a 0? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Are you a yes or a no? Are you going to act or not?
And Elliot giving it, life is not that binary. And Mr. Robot saying, sure it is. You leave, you become a 0, or you can choose to change the world and become a 1. And he really pushes it hard here. He starts to give it all the stuff about Elliot's father. This is about the bastards that killed your father. He was a 0 like you're being.
Mr. Robot also calls it my revolution.
My revolution, yeah. So a few things to pose here about this, but before we do that, I'm just going to wrap up this scene quickly. Mr. Robot is very heavy-handed here.
He is.
I feel it could have been a bit more subtle about this. Do you know who he needed? Thurman Smutney. You needed Thurman Smutney to come in and go, oh, well, Elliot, it's a very simple plan. You see, we're just the Ecor, they're the enemy, and well, it's all good. And Darlene, she's got a worm, and it's all going to be fine. And you're going to do your thing, and we're going to blow up a gas plant, kill some people. So sweet dreams.
I thought you were going to say that he needed Azealia Banks.
Yeah, I think one thing you say at least about Mr. Robot here is he's still more subtle than Azealia Banks might be.
The heavy-handedness that he has here, the lack of fucks he has in just like laying it all on thick, is because he is testing the Mastermind all the time. He's constantly pushing him.
That's what I want you to come to here. Like, what is Mr. Robot's play? Because we know that the mission of Mr. Robot, ultimately, the reason why he exists is to protect Elliot. So it seems to me, and I think we're in simpatico with this because we kind of talked about it in our first rewatch episode, that he's goading the Mastermind deliberately. He wants to fuel the Mastermind's anger as much as possible, so that the Mastermind will eventually fulfill itself and follow through and complete this mission, ultimately letting Elliot go free if it feels it's reached a conclusion. I guess that's the play. The morality of it and the logic of it is really weird. I mean, it makes sense it makes sense to me in a satisfying way. I don't have any qualms about it, but I have seen people online when talking about the series in retrospect, when they're rewatching season 1, a lot of people are quite confused about what Mr. Robot's game plan is. I think you just have to go with the full interpretation. Just take the logic as far as possible. That Mr. Robot just he can't see any other way to get rid of the mastermind except have the mastermind fulfill its complete potential. And he's just banking on that being the thing to work.
I wonder if there's a second option that he's also doing by goading them so much as that maybe he wants him to quit at that point as well. So there's
I
like
suppose that's possible.
Because if the mastermind quits, will he then just like, is that it? The game's a bogey. He's no longer the vigilante hacker, and he'll just leave. It's a win-win in a way for Mr. Robot. He either forces the mastermind to do what he wants, or forces him out. And I guess that explains the initial aggression, because he is an American term. He's riding him hard. This entire first much of the second season, until they sort of kind of end up working together. But to the casual viewer, to the viewer who doesn't know where the show goes right now, it just seems like this guy is a fucking David Koresh mad hacker cult leader. And it's so expertly played. And again, like you say, could this have been Hack of the Week if we didn't know any of the stuff later on about the multiple personalities? Absolutely
totally.
could have. Would Christian Slater's Mr. Robot character have been an amazing, endearing character just being what he's presented as here? Absolutely. I'd have watched the shit out of that.
Same. I mean, you could still make a great Hack of the Week show even from this second episode, and like from this point, Elliot could go back to just being the vigilante hacker. Mr. Robot could be in the background as a recurring antagonist / sometimes accomplice, depending on the mission, and there would always be that kind of moral grey area about Elliot's misgivings about working with him. They could easily got a lot of mileage out of that if it was an entirely different show. So Elliot, when he's leaving, he has that final exchange with Darlene, and I absolutely love this because from Darlene's perspective, Elliot, he's just been an absolute madman in this moment. He turns around just out of the blue and says, "I'm not killing anyone, leave me out of this." And Darlene's like, "What the fuck? You don't get to walk away." And we get her immortal line, even your stupid hoodie can't save you, bitch. Alright, so he goes to Shayla's apartment for his re-up of special juice. Shayla's nowhere to be found. She's evidently locked in the bathroom, and instead we've got Fernando Vera sitting about in his pants.
In his tidy whities.
And I've never seen a man in his pants look more threatening than this man, I gotta be honest. He says she'll be out in a minute, and Elliot tries to give it, we should check on her. And Fernando Vera says, "You're a funny dude, I like you, but don't be rude." It's pretty clear very quickly that Fernando Vera kind of has Elliot's number, because he very quickly surmises that he's taken the withdrawal meds with the morphine. He says, "That's smart, I bet you think you're not even an addict."
That's beautiful. Do you know what I got from Vera here that I didn't get before? Got some Christopher Walken vibes.
Oh, I can see that, yeah.
So just his phrasing, like when he's like, "She's in the tub."
Soup is good food.
That I also wrote down as a note here, as this scene goes on, I wrote, "Everybody loves Elliot."
Yeah. See, it's another obsessive madman clearly developing an early fixation on Elliot here. So these nutcases clearly see something in Elliot. The thing is, I think when I first watched this, I did not appreciate actually that Fernando Vera actually tells us what it is in this scene. I think now, looking at this, I understand Vera a lot more because of where he goes in season 4, and I feel like it is bedded perfectly in this scene. I've seen people online saying they thought the turn of Fernando Vera to become a big bad in season 4 didn't really work for them, that wasn't set up properly. I thoroughly disagree just purely on the basis of this scene.
Yeah.
I think the dialogue in this scene is pretty much, it contains all the information that it needs to convey. Man, we have to make a mention here. Elliot Villar, who's the actor who plays Fernando Vera, he is knocking it out of the park, man. Because this is such a sinister, terrifying performance. Do you know what's so scary about Vera? I've been in the company of guys like this, and in real life they are terrifying. And there is that part. I don't know if you've ever been in this situation, but if you've ever been stuck in a situation that's really awkward to get out of, and this is the guy you're talking to,
yeah,
it is terrifying. There's a part of you thinking, am I even going to get out of this? What does this guy want? That everything he says seems slightly cryptic and pointed, and that he's reading my fucking mind. It's a deeply disturbing situation to get into, and that Vera is clearly someone who knows he has the power to do that, and he can sense when he's got the better of somebody. And to Elliot's credit, he does say that he can see he's not quite got that power over Elliot, which is why I think it's played perfectly in season 4 that Fernando Vera knows he's working from a disadvantage. He knows that Elliot's not afraid of him. He knows that Elliot has in some way got the upper hand.
And that's why he has to break him. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. But yeah, he reminds me so much of like maybe 2 guys I've met in my life that I've had this. I knew I've been close to a really malignant force, let's just put it that way, and I was like, okay, I really need to be out here and away from this guy. Yeah, he brings all that menace to the screen in what I think is a very, very true-to-life fashion.
When Elliot describes him as being one of the worst
human beings I've ever had. Yeah. Password, eat a dick, 6969.
Is the username Big Pappy 6969?
So, and
there's even humour in like the horror. You know, I love that.
Yeah, there always is in this show. Yeah. So in addition to all his porn shenanigans, he is basically openly drug dealing on social media. He's got wafer thin code for various crimes, biscuits and clickety for guns.
But Elliot says he can't believe the cops haven't taken him down.
And rock to sleep is his analogy for getting someone sent to the farm.
One of the reasons that Vera's got his number so quickly is because Vera's the guy that gets Shayla the drugs that Elliot needs, and he's the only one that can do it.
Yeah.
So Elliot's immediately in this conundrum. He's like, normally he would just he'd dispose of this guy upon meeting him, but he can't. At least at first he feels like I can't do it because, you know,
I lose this guy, I lose my supply, and then the pain comes back.
Vera's an integral part of who he is as a character at this point, before he's even introduced. True. You know, it's just like, so anyone who's like, I don't really understand why Vera came back and was a big bad, it's like, man, watch the fucking series.
Yeah, no, exactly. He was clearly a lifeline for Elliot. I mean, this is how Elliot was living his life. Again, it's the old capitalist supply chain, and we mentioned in our first Mr. Robot rewatch episode that it's all about the invisible hand, which Elliot does actually make a reference to later in this episode.
Yeah.
You know, it's that thing where we contort ourselves into shapes that are actually really detrimental for our well-being, but it's the only way we can find to survive in the circumstances that this, you know, economic and cultural setup has provided for us.
So, in this scene again, as we mentioned earlier, we have someone telling Elliot what power is. In this case, it's Vera telling Elliot that true power is hating yourself more than anyone else can.
Now, I have to say, this is where this scene really hits me on a really deep emotional level, because I get this. I've spent, not to get too personal, but you know, I've been through therapy myself. I've spent most of my life having some degree of self-loathing. Hearing someone say this, and someone with the charisma that Fernando Vera has, it's easy to see why some people would fall under his sway, kind of thing. There's something about what he says here that in my mind, even though I know it's toxic as fuck, there's a part of me finds it strangely comforting and empowering. So he says, I hated myself, still do. I think that's key, by the way, to his character. He still hates himself.
Yeah.
I thought that shit was a weakness, but I realised that it was my power. People walk around, they act like they know what hate is. No one knows what hate is until you hate yourself. Truly hate yourself. That's power. It's both terrifying and disturbingly inspiring to someone with self-loathing issues. To think that you don't need to go through therapy, that instead you can somehow embrace your own self-loathing and it can give you some form of power, is actually a really seductive idea. And he knows this, and he's clearly got, and I think, you know, when we see that he's got his rando henchpersons later in season 4, that's because they're probably all people with some degree of self-loathing or lack of self-esteem, and to them Fernando Vera probably is an aspirational figure, even though they're probably all shit terrified of him. Just that promise that he might show them the way to embrace their own power and their own self-loathing, I can see totally how that would be seductive.
Yeah, he's such a complex, like, layered character for someone who could so easily have been like this caricature meth head bad guy.
So Vera comes closer with a gun, his crotch and his pants really close to Elliot's face.
It's like absurdly close, I noticed.
This is probably the most intimidating male semi-nudity I've ever seen on screen. But Vera says, "You ain't scared. Good. I ain't wasted my time making friends with you." Which at that point, I'm terrified.
Then he starts going off on his whole, this is beautiful meaning, that we're meeting here at this point.
Your star orbiting mine. This is beautiful. Shades of Tyrell here.
Yeah.
Although we've not been that far down the road yet with Tyrell, but yeah, once Tyrell gets a bit more into his obsessive mode, yeah, it's a very similar train of thought. They both clearly think there is some kismet involved in meeting Elliot, which again, going back to the Hacker of the Week, superhero vigilante, that's very much a superhero staple. Anyway, Fernando Vera takes the withdrawal meds with him, says Elliot's courage can carry him through, which I think is a nice touch. And he's talking about his quote-unquote relationship with Shayla. Says, now that we're friends, I trust you'll respect this boundary. Elliot does not hide his indignation at that, to which Vera says, it's a smart time to be scared and a stupid time. So they get the lockpick scene, every hacker's favourite tool. I quite like this detail. It's like talking about the satisfying nature of the click, because I guess it's a hacker gets to do so little physical that actually get to do physical hacking is a different kind of satisfaction. Reminding Elliot that he is actually a real person. What's the expression? AFK.
Yep, IRL.
So we get to see Shayla. Oh boy, this is disturbing.
Oh yeah.
So Shayla waking up, clearly beaten unconscious, asks why she's in the tub. Elliot asks her, do you remember having sex with him? She says no, but we get Elliot's internal voice saying, but he does. Elliot suggests that they just go to the police and get rid of Vera. But she says, he gives me a good deal on the split, I'm making money, and that's where Elliot in his internal monologue tells us, there it is again, the invisible hand.
Yep.
So it's a more explicit reference to capitalism, and also thematically just the ingrained patterns that result in bad choices and exploitation and self-exploitation. So this is where we get the theme of this episode. Elliot starts ruminating on the subject of choices. Do we make them or do they make us? If he gets rid of Vera, the pain comes back without the drugs. On the other hand, Vera has graduated to rape, and that's when Elliot wakes up, he says he can't be allowed to exist anymore. And I've made a note in my notes here. This is the vigilante superhero in fully active mode. It's come back to the surface. The mastermind is really in full back in control of its mission at this point. And we'll see the fruition of that towards the episode when he decides to go back and meet with Mr. Robot. So we get the juxtaposition here of Elliot going to Krista's office at the same time as we see Elliot sending all the information about Fernando Vera to the police and Vera's arrest. Some really nice details here. Elliot standing in front of those paintings in Krista's office with the kind of pastoral scenes representing what I would say are kind of happy childhood scenes, which we will come to know more and more as this show goes on, is pretty alien to the kind of childhood experience by Elliot. As all this is unfolding visually, Elliot is ruminating, how do we know if we're in control? And in fact, he's saying this to Krista, what are our choices, Coke or Pepsi, McDonald's or Burger King? It's all about the illusion of choice. I feel like Esmail is definitely channeling a lot of Jean Baudrillard here. Also a bit of Chomsky, manufacturing consent. Also reminds me a lot of a George Carlin routine from late in his life about the illusion of choice, in which he applies it directly to the Republicans and the Democrats, but a lot of the rhetoric is very similar to this. It does also, of course, entirely echo with the binary theme of ones and zeros. Watching this again, this is a big move from Elliot, and I think the first time I watched this show, I did not really... It didn't really register just how big a move it was to have Vera sent away, because at that point I was not banking on the fact that we would see Fernando Vera again, because at this point he could just be a background character, like a one and done. What is Elliot's plan here? Because he knows he's just left himself in the shit.
And we see just how much the withdrawal fucks him up.
Yeah, absolutely.
In what, 2 episodes time?
Right, yeah. And there's a whole episode of it, of the absolute meltdown. It says our choices are prepaid for us a long time ago, and Krista is trying to, bleed him for nuggets of information. He said, I thought I was doing something good. I was part of this project, something special, obviously being sketchy with the details. And we're juxtaposed here with scenes of Elliot walking dark streets alone, which again is a staple of the old vigilante superhero type thing.
Yeah, some Batman shit going on.
I made a note here, I love the score in this scene. It's Matt Quayle at his most kind of low-key and evocative. There's some really nice stuff going on there. But he says, it turned out to be a mistake, just like everything else. I might as well do nothing. Krista says, you've brought this up before about not feeling in control. Now, of course, we know, in retrospect now, that there are many parts of Elliot fighting for control. So yeah, there's another whole bunch of double and triple meanings there. She reminds Elliot of things he said in her office about his father. Do you remember? I know that Elliot didn't answer whether he remembered or not, which is one of those moments where I'm thinking, I do feel there's leeway for us still to see moments where the real Elliot is allowed to leak in and out.
From that point, as the scene builds up, when he just like shut up at her, you know, that's like the mastermind's being like, nope,
yeah,
call time on this. You're
think
getting too close.
That's my take as well. Yeah, there's a moment where it's a bit shaky, and the mastermind like puts the foot down basically, and that's where we get the shut up. Now, Krista, of course, goes on to talk about Edward Alderson, and she says things that are very similar to what Mr. Robot said earlier in this episode. Your father didn't let anyone help him. He pushed people away. He didn't try to fight the company or seek better care. She's saying that's what Elliot told her. Which also makes me think, was that Mr. Robot in control at some point in the past? Maybe there's a wee bit of that leaking out. I don't know. But definitely there's a lot of... I feel like looking back in retrospect at this now, I do feel like there's a lot of areas here where you can see...
You can see different personalities have been in charge at different points.
Yeah, at least for brief moments, or there's like wee bits of them are just leaking through. It does feel like that's what Esmail is kind of suggesting to me.
Can we take a moment here? Can I just interject with some Gloria Rubin facts?
Go for it. I'm always here for Gloria Rubin facts. She is an absolute star on this show.
She was a backing singer for Tina Turner.
What?
Yep. And she also sang the Canadian national anthem at the 1998 Baseball All-Star Game.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to need to try and look see if there's any YouTube footage of Gloria Rubin back in her singing days before she became an actor.
This is like a double callback to MKW, Michael K. Williams being a backup dancer.
Yep.
for
Maya.
For Maya, yeah. And also Jesse Reyes singing the Canadian national anthem for the NBA playoffs. It's like all the things we've mentioned. So Krista says, maybe he felt the same way you do now. But the difference is you found options, and that's the power you have. So there's that word again. So what I find interesting about this, in a way, despite Krista's intentions, I feel like she actually helps spur the mastermind on here. She actually pushes the mastermind back in the direction of Mr. Robot. Because the way she phrases this, it's chiming so much with what Mr. Robot said, that the mastermind just thinks, okay, I guess that's the mission then. And she does say, for the past month I've seen you slip into old patterns. And I think that's been the past month since the hack. So in that past month, we know he's not been doing so much of the hacking, and he's not been involved with F Society. So the mastermind has been kind of at a loss. It probably has been losing control. That
part of his brain, as he mentions in episode 1, hasn't been...
exactly. It's not been as itching as much.
Yep.
And so Krista, bless her, by trying to do her job, has actually pushed this alternate personality to fulfill its own mission, which is a nice layer of irony. Alright, so Vera gets buried in the digital cemetery, and we think at this point this might be the last we'll see of him, but it turns out, spoiler
alert,
turns out not to be.
Were you able to make out at all what was written on the CD for Fernando? Because I tried to look at it and I tried to pause, but I couldn't make out. It was just like a mad cursive scrawl. No idea what was written there.
The Haunting of Cursive Manor is my favourite show on Netflix currently. That's what I can't laugh at.
So, and then we see him looking at the plans for Steel Mountain.
Yes, yep. Let's bear in mind what spurs him to look at it, though. Looks like it's the Eraserhead Radiator. He's got the wee lady in there saying, "In Steel Mountain, everything is fine." Okay, meanwhile, Angela, who we've not seen much of this episode, clearly worried about Elliot, who will not answer her calls. Ollie... Peak Ollie is trying to burn the CD that Cisco gave him, and he's like talking over his shoulder. Peak douchebag Ollie, just kind of brushing off everything she's saying. Oh, you know, Ellie, he's a bit of a weirdo. He gets something in his inbox. It's clearly from a side chick.
Yep.
Stella B, or as he calls her, Arizona Buddy Fred.
Did you pause and look at his inbox?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Oh, man, there's some classic stuff in there.
Give me some gems.
Well, there's an email from All Safe Management about sexual harassment in the workplace meeting.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of hilarious, just like single word responses to stuff. But the best one, there's what looks like a notification from his bank, and the subject heading just says, "You spent all your money on coke."
Amazing.
So good. I love those little touches.
That is terrific. Esmail, you cad. So, while Angela is fretting about Elliot, Ollie just walks in to the bathroom, says, "Say, my Arizona buddy Fred has just called me up. Wants me to go around for a beer. Shouldn't take long."
My Arizona buddy Fred wants me to go around and
Ollie
fuck
in
him.
the sense that he is a shit liar.
He is so
because
bad.
What would have happened if Angela said, "Oh, mind if I come along?" I mean, what would have stopped her from saying that?
I don't know, man. I think Angela's too busy staying at home doing something to her nails with what looks like a medieval torture device.
Yeah, I did notice that.
The fuck was that?
It was I think it was a prop from David Cronenberg's Dead Ringers.
So while Ollie goes off for his date with Arizona Fred, we get some creepy hacksaw webcam shit going on. Some voyeur stuff.
It's because
Cisco...
he been hacked.
Yep.
Cisco is in control. He is spying through the webcam. Yeah, it's funny in the context of what we see here the first time round. It does seem like Cisco's been a creep.
A bit.
But see, in retrospect, I actually don't think he is. I think he's monitoring what he needs to monitor, and it just so happens that Angela is on the screen.
I mean, to be fair, he cuts away.
Yeah, he doesn't. He actually, he navigates away, and he's messaging his clearly Dark Army pal. We're in. So we do get it informed to us here that clearly Cisco, we don't know his name yet, is in cahoots with the Dark Army. We can surmise that from this.
And then we move on to the classic boardwalk fail, or as I've got written down here, beach drop.
Beach drop. Yeah, so Elliot agrees to meet up with Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot is at the boardwalk. He is reading Resurrection by Leo Tolstoy, which is a book we will come back. It will come back. We'll see it again and again.
Yep.
In relation to Edward Alderson. For anyone who doesn't know anything about that book, what I believe it's actually Tolstoy's last long form novel. I don't think he wrote another one after it. But it's essentially a story about a nobleman who seeks redemption after he rapes a young woman that he's in love with. And actually, it's more convoluted than that. The young woman, after that happens, ends up having an absolutely dismal life, and she ends up in court for a petty crime. And he is actually one of the people there in power who can choose what to happen to her, and he basically is partly responsible for her going to prison. And later in life, he comes to kind of really regret all these things, and he starts to seek some kind of redemption. In Tolstoy style, it's a very heavy novel. It'll take you about 6 months to read. It's worth it, though. Like all Tolstoy stuff is worth reading, certainly. Why Sam Esmail chose particularly this novel is something I think is always going to be eternally open to debate. I've made some notes here just on things I could remember from the book. I read that book a long time ago. Basically, the protagonist does attempt to help the woman that he raped years before, but the book really more sort of focuses on his own internal struggle, like kind of morally, about how he can improve his life, how he can improve lives of others. The world around him is painted as a cruel world in that Tolstoy way. Like, everything is pitiless. Society is pitiless. The people at the top of society are absolutely pitiless. And so this guy is basically having an absolute conversion. And he decides, among other things, to give up his property and pass ownership onto the peasants that work his land. And he ends up kind of going into exile. And yeah, if I remember right, he ends up wanting to marry the girl that he originally raped, because they develop this kind of relationship, but she rebuffs him, and she in fact falls in love with another man. And towards the end of the novel, basically what happens is he gives his blessing for that relationship, and they choose to live apart from each other. And he goes on to live as part of a penal community, and that's how he goes on to seek his redemption, basically. So there are themes in it of redistributing wealth, for one thing. so that's relevant to Mr. Robot. One thing I thought here that's maybe it's just an odd thought that I had. In a sense, Elliot has resurrected his own father subconsciously to atone for the damage he's done to his son, and for Elliot's own sense of self-loathing, and how all of that will eventually result in a journey that causes Elliot to pass wealth to the masses by extracting it from people who exploit people at the bottom rungs of society, in the same way that Elliot as a child was exploited. There's definitely kind of links you can make there. I don't think any of it's entirely solid. I mean, there's no obvious allegory you can take from that novel that applies literally to Mr. Robot. So realistically, it would probably take a very refined reading of that novel to find all the reasons why Sam Esmail chose it. I'm going to take Sam Esmail at face value here. Mm-hmm. He knows why he chose that book, and it's clearly, in his mind, very relevant, both to Edward and to Elliot and to their relationship, and probably to the larger world of Mr. Robot. But those are the only small things I can think of from memory of that book that I can think that make any obvious kind of connections.
Uh-huh.
For the record, the original Russian title of the novel, Voskresение, is also sometimes translated to English as The Awakening.
Oh, we just got schooled.
Oh. Thanks for that, Hamilton. That is a good nugget. Cool. That's a nice thing about languages. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, that's cool. So that adds another level to it.
For sure.
Yeah, it's something worth revisiting, I think, for future episodes when this pops up again. I'll at some point I'll try and investigate, see if there's more notes that can be made on this. For the moment, though, let's move on. Elliot tells Mr. Robot he has a plan for Steel Mountain where nobody will die. Mr. Robot seems quite dismissive at first, and he insists that Elliot tell him about his father. This is where we get the great line, "Don't try to get inside my head, man. Your David Koresh shit won't work on me." After a bit of cajoling, Elliot eventually says his father was his best friend, one of the best E-Corps engineers, suddenly fired out of the blue. It turned out he had leukemia. He made Elliot promise not to tell anyone, including his mother. Eventually, Elliot told his mother. Edward got angry. This detail, man, Elliot says he tried to hug him. And we know how much Elliot does not like being hugged. I feel like that should have been a clue. I mean, maybe he was fine. We know he's fine with physical contact with people close to him, but even so, I felt like it should have been a clue. But his dad kept pushing him away, backwards through the window. He fell and broke his arm. He never spoke to me after that, he says. Couldn't even look at me, not even on the night he died. See that detail? I've got a feeling that might be true. Because I feel like, knowing what we now know about Edward Alderson, he'd probably been made in his final days to reckon with Elliot's reaction. I guess it depends how you read this, because you get that scene in the cinema, I think it's in season 3. Does he die on the floor, or does he die at a later point?
Yeah, I was wondering, because...
Difficult to say. I mean...
It's Elliot is the one who's not talking to him at that point, so... If he dies on the floor at that point.
That's, true. So maybe, I suppose another way of looking at it, Elliot's internalised this and done a Missy Elliott, flipped it and reversed it. And he's kind of rewritten his own sort of aloofness in that moment and projected it onto his father. I suppose that's another way it could work.
Yep. Keeping all the popcorn for himself too. What a guy.
It does. Yeah. Either way, let's say that scene in the cinema is where Edward Alderson dies on the spot. Let's say that's the last contact they ever had, and there's no reason they're supposed to think that it's not, because Sam Esmail does not give us any more beyond that point. I suppose it still works because Edward is in that moment reckoning with what's happening, because he knows why Elliot is behaving the way he's behaving. It's not a mystery. Ever since that window situation happened, I guess in that moment he'd be feeling, this is exactly what I wanted to avoid. I wanted to try and fix it. Because people like this are sick in the head, right? Obviously. So they do feel on some level that they can fix it. And that's exactly what Mr. Robot, that's exactly what Edward is trying to do in that scene at the cinema. If I take my son to a movie, everything will be fine, you know. And this is not just exclusive to this kind of abuse. people who take part in any kind of abuse, this is a tactic they use a lot. It's a gaslighting tactic, essentially. It's like saying, no, but things between us are sometimes good. Remember the good times. And I feel like this is a last desperate attempt by Edward Alderson, this cinema scene. But he must surely know deep down that it can't work. So when Elliot's giving it this speech about he couldn't look me in the face, I kind of feel like on some level he is recognising at least the fact that his dad kind of knew he was defeated in that moment. Mr. Robot has a line here who says, I understand what it's like to lose a parent. It's heartbreaking. Now, we speculated a wee bit in our previous episode about Mr. Robot, where he has that story about... Mr. Robot has a story about his own father, and we speculated whether or not that was a story about Edward Alderson's father, or whether this was just a complete concoction by Elliot's subconscious. Is he here talking about that same concoction, if it is a concoction, or is he talking about from the perspective of Edward Alderson, about Edward Alderson's father dying, or is this Mr. Robot as merely a part of Elliot's subconscious, echoing the fact that, yeah, I also lost our father?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think it's Mr. Robot talking about Edward.
Yeah, I think that one makes the most complicated sense, but probably the best sense. So we then get the very thorny ending to this, where Mr. Robot asks him, do you ever think you deserved it? And once again, this is probably the most flagrant example of really needling at the mastermind's sense of buried shame and guilt, and Elliot's shame and guilt for not having protected his younger self. I would say, man, on the rewatches of this, I hate this. I mean, I love it as drama, but I hate that moment because it's just horrible.
Yeah.
I do want to do a Greta Thunberg and just shout at Mr. Robot, how dare you? It's just horrible. It's a horrible, horrible tactic. But as we've discussed, it's what Mr. Robot has surmised is going to be the only way to get the mastermind to go full mastermind. So he pushes him off the boardwalk, or as we come to note later, boardwalk fail. When Elliot becomes a viral YouTube video.
Yep.
And my favourite cryptic line is the one we're left with, where Mr. Robot says, you didn't commit to the sacred pact you'd formed. Now, I feel like this could be read several ways. It could be referring to the fact that ultimately Elliot rebelled against his father's abuse in the moment of the window situation, and the sacred pact being the abuse. It could also simply be Mr. Robot, again, goading the mastermind's anger by encouraging him to kind of atone by avenging not only his father, but all abused by E-Corp and the system that E-Corp represents. So kind of saying, basically, as Elliot says himself, he was my best friend, so the sacred pact could simply be you had a special friendship with your father. It could just be towing that line, or it could be some combination of both.
I think that Mr. Robot talking about the sacred pact in that moment, it's Mr. Robot talking to Mr. Robot, not to Elliot or to the mastermind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because when you watch the scene, Mr. Robot, Christian Slater, isn't looking at Elliot when he says that.
Oh, that's that.
Yeah, so I feel like
that is a good catch.
Yeah, I feel like that's Mr. Robot talking to himself because he failed to protect Elliot sufficiently from the abuse. So Mr. Robot has this self-loathing as well as Elliot's self-loathing and the mastermind self-loathing. But yeah, so I felt like that's Mr. Robot reckoning with his own failure to protect Elliot.
I think that works. Yeah, I feel like some combination of all of that stuff is easily in play. One of the things I love about this show is the way it all ended. We never got solid interpretations for any of this stuff, and we're free to kind of sit and, which I guess is the beauty of us doing this podcast, is that we get to go over this stuff and ruminate on it a bit more. Yeah, after you saying it seems really obvious. That is an obvious interpretation. It just had not crossed my mind, but yeah, no, you're right, it totally works.
Captain Obvious over here.
No, and these are the kind of nuances I think you do miss when you do a binge watch. When you just get to appreciate what section off an episode as its own little movie, basically. you do get to appreciate these nuances a lot more, and there's a lot of work goes into these shows. I mean, this show, man, so much work has gone into each episode being very much its own thing. In fact, as this show goes on, that becomes seems to become more of an obsession for Sam Esmail.
Especially
that fourth season is every single episode is like an individual movie.
Yeah, it feels like season 4 just feels like a series of short films wherein Sam Esmail is just stretching his creative muscles, stylistically speaking, without losing any of like the integrity or the flow of the story. It's great.
Yeah, once again, glad we're doing this. Man, I love this show.
Me too. It's literally the best show, which is why I'm going to give episode 2 a massive whopping 9 5s out of 9. How about you? What would you rate episode 2?
I'm also going to give it 9 5s out of 9. Which I believe was a score for the pilot as well.
Yep.
So this show is doing pretty good so far. I think I might stick with it.
Yeah, me too. I think maybe we should do more of these Mr. Robot episode rewatches. But we'll do those in the new year. That's 2021 for you calendar fans out there. In the meantime, next episode of F Sobriety, we're going to round off Fargo Season 4, and we are going to have our end-of-year festive War on Christmas spectacular.
Yep, I think that's what we'll do.
Yep, it's going to be awesome.
We'll make an event of it.
It's going to be the War on Christmas party.
In the meantime, thank you from me.
And thank you from me.
And thank you from Snowman, and from Azealia Banks, and from Thurman Smutney, who is halfway through his thanks. He'll get to the end at some point. James?
Yep. Speaking of the end, we've reached the end of another episode of F Sobriety. Can't believe we've done it. If you've enjoyed what you've been listening to, give us a follow on one of our social medias. The Hamiltron will tell you over the credits how to do that. Maybe recommend us to a friend, if you have a friend who would be interested in listening to me and Craig talk about TV and pop culture. It means a lot to us, genuinely. Joking aside, thank you for listening, those of you who listen, and please do feel free to spread the word.
Yeah, spread the love. We do appreciate it, and we will always appreciate more of it.
Well, Craig, how's your bottle of special juice looking there?
My special juice is somewhere around the region of half the bottle.
F Sobriety, Episode 8, Special Juice, was conceived by Craig Woods and James Hamilton, edited by James Hamilton, and is a production of Half the Bottle. The theme music is Colossal Estates by Errors, available on Rock Action Records. Hi the hens to our social medias if you feel so inclined, on facebook.com/FSobrietyPodcast, and on Twitter at FSobrietyCast. This, us, being here, this has beautiful meaning.
He comes out, Jesus fucking Christ. He comes straight out and he offers Elliot head of hypersecurity. Jesus fuck, man. Here's the blooper reel.